Chapter 862. Why did the viewers from two different dimensions use Chinese characters? It was a good question, but Jiang Pingji couldn't answer it. She made up a story with her eyes wide open. Maybe it's because Chinese characters are the universal language of the entire dimension? The viewers in the two streaming rooms were speechless after hearing it. What she said made sense. I'm actually speechless? A certain viewer on the blue bullet screen spoke shakily. He was mentally prepared to be kicked out of the streaming room by the big boss on the red bullet screen. Wuxia and Xianxia. In the past, there were always people who said that English was the universal language of the world. Now I can hold my head high and say that Chinese characters are the universal language of the entire dimension. I'm so touched. I hope the country can take this seriously and abolish CT4 and CT6. In the sea of red bullet screens, the blue bullet screen was particularly eye-catching. It even received countless likes. The viewers on the red bullet screen cheered for the blue bullet screen. CT4 and CT6 were all tearful after saying too much. The two groups of people who were fighting each other to the death were now tearful when they saw each other from the same place. The two sides had a friendly discussion about the two dimensions. However, the restrictions of the streaming room were too great. They couldn't talk about topics related to politics. They racked their brains and could only figure out the timeline of the two dimensions. Other than some differences in historical events, the general situation was actually the same. Many quick-witted and ill-intentioned people had already come up with crooked ideas. Since the situation of the two dimensions was so similar, but the development was different, could they help each other? Thinking about the more popular plagiarism category in online novels, maybe they could imitate it. Who knows, it might become popular. Anyway, it was two different worlds. Even if someone pointed out plagiarism, it would be extremely difficult for the two dimensions to pursue the matter of plagiarism. To put it nicely, they could learn from each other and develop together. They couldn't bear to let the magnificent civilization disappear just like that. Jiang Pingji casually glanced at the bullet screen in the streaming room. Many viewers also noticed it. Some felt that plagiarism was wrong. Some felt that since they were from two dimensions, what was wrong with exchanging civilizations? Anyway, the original author couldn't cross the dimension wall to pursue the matter and sue. Online novels were all like this. No one would know even if they plagiarized. They forgot that this was Jiang Pingji's streaming room. As a streamer in a level 6 streaming room, her authority was higher than before. After a while, those in the audience who were discussing the feasibility of borrowing were all kicked out. They were stunned for a moment. When they looked at the system notification again, their faces couldn't help but twitch. Because you have violated the rules of the live broadcast room, you have been kicked out of the live broadcast room by the host. To be honest, this was the first time Jiang Pingji took the initiative to kick someone since she took over the streaming room. Even a fool would know that she was a little angry. Not only were there blue comments, but there were also quite a number of red comments. Jiang Pingji had a warm smile on her face. According to the federal law on the protection of original works of literature and all kinds of property rights, the crime of plagiarism is very serious. The minimum penalty is 3 years, and the maximum is life. Even if they weren't sued by the original creator, 90% of the profits would still belong to the original creator, and they would have to compensate for their mental distress. If you want to use it as a reference, I won't object, but please ask the original author to personally authorize it. Furthermore, you can request the government to take the lead and establish a special alliance to regulate the cultural exchange between the two planes. After that, she got up to pack up her fishing rod and basket, preparing to go home. After hearing what Jiang Pingji said, some of the audience blushed. Some felt that she was meddling in other people's business, while others strongly supported her. After all, the streaming room was someone else's territory, and the audience had to act according to the basic rules. After going through half a day of battle, the audience from the two planes could barely communicate calmly. Seeing this, Jiang Pingji revealed a faint smile and leisurely returned to the city. Unbeknownst to her, the matter of the streaming room had grown wings and occupied the headlines of major websites. It was fine if it was a cross-dimensional live broadcast, but now she could communicate with the audience from another plane on the same streaming platform. She was going to go to heaven. The red comments were relatively calm. Although Jiang Pingji's streaming room was a little strange and often showed all kinds of violent scenes, on the whole, it was still positive. Many directors who filmed ancient wars liked to edit the content of the live broadcast and use it as a reference. Nowadays, the film and television industry preferred to shoot indoors more and more. They used the green screen wherever it was useful, and they rarely spent energy on shooting real scenes. In general, Jiang Pingji's streaming room was more positive in the eyes of the public. However, it was different for the viewers in the blue bullet screen. As soon as the news spread, it was like a stone that stirred up 1,000 ripples. Abuse and mockery had the absolute upper hand. Thanks to the female transmigrator, the streaming room had been labeled as despicable. In addition, the streaming room had been around for more than 20 years. Many of the audience had a fixed impression of it. Once it was mentioned, they could not help but curse or mock it, as if it was a pile of stinky feces. After such a long time, the audience in the streaming room had been fixed. Now that the streamer had suddenly changed, not only did it not attract new readers, but it also drove away this part of the audience who liked beautiful women. As a result, for a long time, the ratio of red to blue in Jiang Pingji's streaming room hovered around 9:1 or 19:1. The red bullet screen viewers were overjoyed. The cake was only so big. The streaming room's upper limit was 850,000. They could not wait for all the upper limit to be theirs. Yes, the streamer was theirs. No unruly people could snatch her away. Jiang Pingji did not care about this. She did not care which plane the audience was from, as long as they were not from her original plane. As a general of the Federation and the commander of 1/10 of the army, she had now been reduced to a small farm owner. Her fate was miserable. Humming a tune, Jiang Pingji walked into the city under the orange afterglow of the sunset. The streets were still bustling with business. The street vendors were shouting and hawking, and children were chasing and laughing. The child who was leading accidentally bumped into Jiang Pingji. She did not move an inch, but the child fell. There are carriages and pedestrians everywhere. You naughty children, if you want to play, go somewhere else. Jiang Pingji's face was fierce. She picked up the child who had fallen. The child was sobbing. A woman in the distance saw it and was scared out of her wits. She hurriedly ran over to carry the child away. She was so scared that her shoulders were trembling. The woman saw Jiang Pingji's face clearly. It was as if someone had stolen her voice. She could not say anything. Jiang Pingji was usually very close to the people. Many people knew what she looked like. The woman had seen her before. My son is naughty and has disturbed the prefecture magistrate. As the woman knelt, the 2- or 3-year-old child in her arms knelt as well. Jiang Pingji had a very good memory. She saw the woman's face and found it somewhat familiar. You are. Listening to the woman's words, she was obviously not an ordinary village woman. Chapter 863. Jiang Pingji was surprised. She lifted her hand to help the woman up and said with a smile, "This isn't a good place to talk. Why don't we sit in the restaurant next door?" Judging from the woman's appearance, she lived a hard life. She lived frugally and only ate 1 meal a day. The child beside her was raised well. He was fair, chubby, and adorable. Even the clothes he wore were made of fine cotton. Fine cotton was not expensive, but for a peasant family with an average family, it was a huge expense. The woman hesitated for a moment, then beamed with joy. She carried the child in her arms and followed Jiang Pingji to the nearby reception house. The reception house was opened in all the towns and cities in Wanzhou. Its reputation was improving day by day. The dishes developed by the chefs were also changing day by day. Although it was geared towards middle and high-class customers, ordinary people could occasionally have a meal if they gritted their teeth. The woman followed Jiang Pingji to a private room. She and the old housekeeper lived frugally to support their young master. They had never been to the reception house. Order more of what you want to eat. If I remember correctly, is he the one protected by his mother? How many people had Jiang Pingji saved during the earthquake in Shangjing? Most of the people in Xiangyang district today had followed her to escape from Shangjing to this place. The woman nodded with tears in her eyes. Her eyes were bloodshot, but she did not look like she had been wronged. Instead, she looked excited. She had always remembered Jiang Pingji, but she was a busy person. How could she remember her? She had just reminded her, but she did not have high hopes. She did not expect Jiang Pingji to be right. Yes, it is my young master. The woman nodded excitedly. The chubby child in her arms twisted in confusion. He looked at Jiang Pingji and then at the woman who was holding him. He did not understand what had happened. He could only step on the thigh of the woman who was kneeling. He tiptoed and tried to wipe her tears with his chubby white paws. How have you been all these years? Jiang Pingji looked at the child and dug out the relevant fragments from her memory. She remembered that when she rescued the child from the ruins, the child was protected by a woman who had her back curled up. If the woman had not protected him with her body, her spine, and her head, arms, and chest, he would have died a long time ago. A pure smile appeared on the woman's face. It's all thanks to the prefecture overseer's good governance that I was able to survive in this world with my master. In the past, there were 20 people in the mansion, but after the earthquake, only 3 survived. A wet nurse, a housekeeper, and a 2-month-old child. The world outside was too chaotic. The 3 of them were old, weak, women, and children. There was no way for them to seek refuge with their relatives. They could only follow Jiang Pingji to Xiangyang district. The old housekeeper did the accounting and outside work, while she knitted sweaters or embroidered some patterns at home to sell. She lived frugally on weekdays. After deducting the small amount of rent paid to the county headquarters, the remaining money was enough for them to live on. The 2 of them were loyal and devoted servants. They would rather work themselves a little harder than suffer the slightest injustice to the child. Therefore, among the 3 of them, only the child was wearing clothes made of fine cotton. Jiang Pingji said, "You're the wet nurse?" If I remember correctly, there was an old man who survived. The woman said, "Prefecture overseer, you have a good memory. That was my wife's dowry butler." Jiang Pingji said to the child, "Come here." The child was very guilty. He had just bumped into someone. How would he dare to take the initiative to approach her? The woman encouraged him, and he ran to Jiang Pingji hesitantly. Jiang Pingji carried him and bounced him up and down. The 2-year-old child was quite heavy. I remember that the child's family seems to be extraordinary. Have you never thought of bringing the child to look for his relatives after so many years? Before the earthquake, land in Shangjing was expensive. Those who could buy property there were either rich or respectable. Logically speaking, the child's parents were not ordinary people. The woman said, "I had this plan for a long time, but there were wars everywhere in the past. The housekeeper and I didn't dare to bring the young master to take risks. Therefore, it has been delayed until now. I plan to save enough money in a few years to set off to look for my relatives, so as not to delay the young master's initiation." In the whole of Dongqing, what place was safer than Wanzhou? The lion was entrenched and heavily guarded. The prefecture magistrate loved the people like his own children. He governed the whole of Wanzhou in an orderly manner. Outside the boundaries of Wanzhou, there were either wars or all kinds of disasters. How could she and the old housekeeper protect the young master? Jiang Pingji carried the child and put some food in his bowl. What is this child's background? Since I saved him and met him on the street today, it seems that we are fated. If I can help, I can send someone to pass a message to the child's relatives and ask them to bring the child back as soon as possible. Looking at you, these years have not been easy. The woman's eyes turned red again. She kowtowed and said, "Thank you, prefecture magistrate. If there is a next life, I will definitely tie a ring to repay your kindness." Wiping away her tears, the woman continued, "My master is from the Cui family of Chongzhou." The Cui family of Chongzhou? Jiang Pingji carried the child in one hand and ordered the food on the table with the other. What a coincidence! Chongzhou was her father, Lu Shi's territory. As for the Cui family, Jiang Pingji had vaguely heard rumors about them. The Cui family had been in Chongzhou for a long time. They were the local tyrants, but they were not a proper noble family. They had resources, but they were looked down upon. The reason was simply because the Cui family had a close relationship with the northern borderline. They did business in both places. They were even fence-sitters. They leaned toward whichever side the wind blew. Jiang Pingji corresponded with Lu Shi. He did not have a high opinion of the Cui family. He even said that they reeked of money. How could they be noble and virtuous like scholars? At first glance, the Cui family was aligned with power and money. No wonder Lu Shi had such a bad impression of them. The woman nodded vigorously. She said, "My wife is the eldest daughter-in-law of the Cui family's first branch." Chongzhou and the northern borderline were borderline. It had always been a place of constant conflict. Even if the Cui family was on good terms with the northern borderline, they could not stop the bandits from running amok. The Cui family sent the eldest daughter-in-law to Shangjing to await delivery. Who knew that they would encounter a rare earthquake? Jiang Pingji had a change of heart. "My father is the prefecture magistrate of Chongzhou. What a coincidence. I will write a letter to my father and ask the Cui family to send someone to bring you back." For the woman, it was a difficult task, but for Jiang Pingji, it was as easy as lifting a finger. After the woman heard it, she kowtowed to Jiang Pingji a few times in excitement. She almost spoke incoherently. Jiang Pingji looked at the child and smiled meaningfully. She inquired about the residence of the woman and the child and accompanied them for dinner. Only then did she return to the district headquarters under the thin and cold moonlight. She said to the people beside her, "Summon Wenjing, Zisher, and Zixiao. Tell them that I have something to discuss with them." The others were not in Xiangyang district. Jiang Pingji could only summon the 3 advisors first. Jiang Pingji waited for a while. Qiguan Rang, Feng Zhen, and Wei Ci arrived one after another. The 3 of them looked at each other. They did not know why Jiang Pingji summoned them alone. Chapter 864. Without the slightest precaution or apprehension, their lord had thrown them a thunderbolt just like that. Just 6 words, like a sudden clap of thunder, shocked the 3 trusted advisors so much that they didn't know what time it was. "Attack the northern borderline now? My lord, you want to ascend to the heavens? What are we going to use to fight? Our heads?" Even Feng Zhen, who was always joking and frivolous, was so frightened by Jiang Pingji that he didn't dare to speak. Qiguan Rang didn't seem to have any reaction, but the feather fan in his hand was fanning furiously. It was obvious how anxious he was. Wei Ci was the first to react. He stepped forward and said, "My lord, you mustn't do that." Attacking the northern borderline now wasn't courage, it was courting death. Wei Ci had thought that his lord was more mature in this life than in her previous life, but now it seemed that she was even more reckless. Jiang Pingji laughed in her heart, but she asked, "Why not?" She didn't do it on a whim. She had clearly thought it through. They all treated her like an enemy, as if she was unreliable. Feng Zhen and Qiguan Rang followed closely to persuade her. No matter what, they had to make their lord dispel this dangerous idea. Qiguan Rang said, "My lord, attacking the northern borderline now is not a good time." Feng Zhen secretly took a deep breath. He stepped forward and said, "I agree with the 2 of you. The northern borderline has experienced the horse plague and suffered a great loss in military strength, but a centipede dies but never falls down. If we don't have the confidence to kill them in one strike, we can't easily attack the northern borderline. Attacking now is no different from striking a rock with an egg. The books on war say that the military is a matter of great importance to a country. It is a place of life and death, a path of survival. In our opinion, we need to go through 5 things, take advantage of the right time, the right place, and the right people. Only then can we give it our all. The time is not ripe yet, so we must not attack." Previously, they had agreed to peacefully develop for a few years before going to war. Why did their lord change her mind now? The 3 of them groaned in their hearts, but they also understood Jiang Pingji's temperament. If they didn't say the ugly things, it would be difficult to convince her to give up on this idea. Jiang Pingji sat in the seat of honor and leaned against the table. She said to Feng Zhen, "Zisher, continue." Feng Zhen said, "The so-called 5 things are Dao, heaven, earth, general, and law." The so-called Dao referred to the agreement between the Lord and the generals, and they could live and die together. The so-called heaven referred to the seasons and climate. The earth referred to the terrain conditions. The general referred to the martial arts and abilities of the generals. As for the law, it referred to the organization of the army, the division of duties between generals, and the logistics and material reserves. Now, we disagree with our Lord, and we don't know the terrain of the northern borderline and the weather conditions after the war. Although our generals are strong, the newly recruited soldiers have not been trained properly. As for the logistics and provisions, there is a huge gap. It will take 2 to 3 years for the army to be effective. Now that we have started the war, the conditions in all aspects are not ripe yet. I hope that my Lord will think twice before acting and consider it carefully. To put it simply, if Jiang Pingji went head-to-head with the north borderline in her current condition, she would definitely be the one to die. Feng Zhen and the others couldn't figure it out no matter how hard they racked their brains. Why did their lord suddenly want to attack the northern borderline? Which idiot instigated this? Jiang Pingji smiled and said, I understand what Zisher is saying. Since she understood, why did she still have such a bold idea? Feng Zhen and the others complained about her incompetence. They even suspected that their lord was deliberately making fun of them. Jiang Pingji's next words made them so angry that they wanted to vomit blood. However, I still want to fight. Wei Ci didn't say a word. He just secretly watched Jiang Pingji's expression. Qiguan Rang, who was beside him, slowed down his fanning. He said, Can you tell us the reason, my lord? His lord's wisdom was not inferior to that of an ordinary strategist. Her thoughts were even more imaginative. She might really have a reason for doing this. Jiang Pingji said, Of course, it's impossible to contend with the northern borderline with just Wanzhou alone. Moreover, I'm not saying that we have to fight now. The three of them were speechless. They inexplicably felt like they had been f***ed. Qiguan Rang's eyes darkened. He seemed to have thought of something, and a layer of worry appeared in his heart. Then what do you mean, my lord? Qiguan Rang asked. Jiang Pingji said, I think it's time to discuss it with my father. The situation in Wanzhou has stabilized. The recruitment of troops is proceeding smoothly, but Chongzhou and Hu County are both in my father's hands. I don't understand the situation there. Even with my father's help, the trouble we'll encounter will not be small. Those who are loyal to my father may not be loyal to me. While it's still early, I want to merge the existing forces into one as soon as possible. Only when the people's hearts are completely united can we have a chance of winning against the northern borderline. Feng Zhen's eyes turned. He seemed to understand Jiang Pingji's reasoning. He asked, My lord, are you worried that your stepbrother has ulterior motives? Lu Shi only had a son and a daughter. In the future, the family property would definitely be divided between the two children. The stepbrother was now 14 years old. In a few years, he would be able to establish his own family. If he was ambitious and competed with Jiang Pingji, it would indeed be troublesome. The external threat had not been resolved yet, but internal problems had arisen. If the siblings fought and held each other back, how could they stand firm in this chaotic world? The best way was to completely stabilize their position and power before the stepbrother grew up. Now that Jiang Pingji wanted to attack the northern borderline, it was an excellent excuse to take over the military power of Chongzhou and Hu County from Lu Shi's hands. The three trusted subordinates had their imaginations run wild. They were all convinced by their own ideas. Jiang Pingji could not help but laugh. She was unwilling to explain too much. They would know the truth when the time came. Lu Shi naturally supported her. However, even if she was Lu Shi's daughter, the aristocratic families in Chongzhou and Hu County might not be willing to accept her. Jiang Pingji did not want to attack the northern borderline a few years later. Her subordinates were still disorganized and in a mess. She continued, Today, I met someone. This person may be the breakthrough point for us to gather the forces in Chongzhou. Chongzhou and the northern borderline are borderline. Once war breaks out, it will definitely be embroiled in the flames of war. As for Hu County, that place has a vast land but a small population. Although it produces a lot of grain, if we farm for a few years, it will be enough for the war. From the looks of it, gathering Chongzhou is far more important than gathering Hu County. When Wei Si and the others heard this, they secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Based on what their lord meant, they should start preparing for war now instead of fighting. They could be at ease. Wei Si asked, "Who is this person?" Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "That person is a direct descendant of the Cui family in Chongzhou. We can make friends with the Cui family in the name of saving their lives and persuade them to stand on our side. The Cui family is a fence-sitter. They have close business dealings with the northern borderline. In other words, they are the most knowledgeable about the situation in the northern borderline. If we want to start a war with the northern borderline, we must have an accurate source of information. Apart from that, the Cui family has been rooted in Chongzhou for a long time. If we take down the Cui family, we can use them to gather other local gentry families. Regardless of whether it was external or internal, the Cui family could be Jiang Pingji's springboard. Lu Shi had been the magistrate of Chongzhou for many years. Although he controlled part of the power, the majority was still in the hands of the local aristocratic families in Chongzhou. These aristocratic families had many thoughts. The interests of the family far surpassed the righteousness of the country. They could totally stab their teammates in the back at a critical moment. Jiang Pengji did not want someone to plot against her behind her back when she was fighting a war. Chapter 865. The three of them were smart. How could they not understand Jiang Pengji's plan? But in that case, she would have to take away Lu Shi's power. This meant that there would be a conflict of interest between father and daughter. If Lu Shi was old, it would not be too much to abdicate. Lu Shi was still in the prime of his life. Would he be willing to give up his military power and be a free rich man? Whether it was Wei Si or Feng Zhen, they had no confidence in this matter. Qiguan Rang turned his gaze to Jiang Pingji and hinted vaguely, "My lord has to discuss this matter with the old master." Jiang Pingji lowered her eyes and said, "I know. Father will understand." Qiguan Rang waved his fan and said, "If we can cooperate with the Cui family and understand the situation and military deployment in the northern borderline, we will have the geographical advantage. Popularizing the method of farming will completely solve the food shortage in 2 to 3 years. The army will be self-sufficient. The generals have rich experience in war and are very familiar with training troops. In the long run, they will definitely be able to train up a fierce and powerful army. At the same time, the northern borderline will be greatly weakened by the horse plague. Later, with Zixiao's strategy of rabbits and sheep, we will have the power to fight the northern borderline in 3 to 5 years. It's said in military books that the poor of a country will lose to the teacher, and the people will be poor." Wei Si added, "If we fight the northern borderline, the long-distance transportation of food will inevitably increase the pressure. The price of food near the army will skyrocket. The local people will be affected and their financial resources will be exhausted. More importantly, the longer the transportation of food is, the higher the risk. Once the food line is cut, the soldiers at the front will be in a desperate situation. In my opinion, my lord can send people to farm in Chongzhou and greatly reduce the transportation of food so that the soldiers will not have to worry about the rear. If food was transported from Hu County or Wanzhou to the front line in Chongzhou, the consumption would be unimaginable. In ancient times, the transportation of food mainly relied on manpower and animal power. The journey was long and time-consuming. It did not mean that the front line would receive the same amount of food as the amount of food transported to the front line. The animals that transported the food had to eat, and the laborers that transported the food had to eat too. If the front line received 1 dan of food, the rear had to send 20 to 30 dan. If there was a war, it was best to farm in a large scale near the front line. This would greatly reduce the risk and consumption of food transportation. But, if that was the case, Wei Si could not help but frown when he thought of other things. Jiang Pingji asked him, "Zixiao, did you think of something?" Wei Si's expression stiffened. He sighed and said, "Due to the impact of the horse plague, the economy of the northern borderline has been severely damaged. As a result, the price of foodstuffs has skyrocketed. A large number of lowly herdsmen are unable to afford foodstuffs and live a difficult life. If the northern borderline knows that we are stationing farmland on a large scale at the border of Chongzhou, when the time comes, it will definitely attract a large number of cavalry to plunder. Xi's consideration was not thorough. I'm afraid that the plan just now will not work. If that was the case, all the grain they had planted in the fields would be taken away by the northern borderline. Were they storing food for themselves or sending food to the enemy? When Wei Ci understood this, he felt ashamed and bowed to ask for forgiveness. Jiang Pingji said, "You're right. Why do I need to apologize?" It was a good idea to station fields at the border of Chongzhou to reduce the consumption of grain. If the northern borderline sends their cavalry to raid us, we don't have to be afraid. We can directly use these people to practice and get used to the northern borderline's fighting style in advance. However, Zi Zhao's suggestion had to be changed. Farming is fine, but it cannot be concentrated in one place. Set up a few more. Currently, the northern borderline could not mobilize their cavalry on a large scale. They could only plunder on a small scale. If the northern borderline's cavalry came to plunder, they would not be able to plunder much at one time. The losses were small, and they could use them to practice. If the grain was stored in one place, if the enemy sneaked around and attacked from behind, wouldn't it be awesome to burn the granary? The four of them discussed the details in detail. Only when the first rays of dawn were slightly tipsy did Jiang Pingji end the topic reluctantly. The three strategists who were forced to stay up all night to work overtime were speechless. Let's stop talking about this first. I'll write a letter to my father and explain the reason to him. He will support me. Jiang Pingji stretched her body peacefully and said to the three of them, "Do you want to stay for breakfast? Today's breakfast is pork buns with mushrooms. It tastes delicious." Feng Zhen was used to wandering around. He often stayed up late, but he was not tired. Qiguan Rank's work and rest schedule had always been stable. He paid attention to his health, but his lord was inhumane. He was used to staying up late. Needless to say, Wei Ci did not even have eye bags after staying up all night. "Thank you, my lord." The three of them ate breakfast with Jiang Pingji and went back with their heads full of battle details. Feng Zhen and Wei Ci were both single people. Their mansions were close to each other. When he and Wei Ci returned, he would shake his head while reminiscing about the craftsmanship of the kitchen in the district headquarters. It made Wei Ci dizzy. Wei said, "Zisher, don't shake your head. I'm dizzy just looking at you." Feng Zhen said, "Shake your head and see if water has entered your brain." Wei Ci was speechless. Feng Zhen continued, "Back then, I was really blinded by lard. How did I end up here? Of all the lords I could have chosen, I just had to choose the one who was the most difficult to serve. If it really didn't work out, I might as well not become an official and be a wealthy idler at home. Now, I have money but no land envoy. There are beauties I can't touch, wine I can't drink, and I don't even have time to sleep. Once I'm on board, I can't get off." Just like last night, the Lord had a sudden impulse and dragged them along to discuss for the whole night. The whole night? Did the Lord still remember that he was sick and weak? She was really using men like mules. Wei Ci suddenly said, "My lord, why are you here?" Feng Zhen was so scared that his whole body trembled. He hugged Wei Ci and hid behind him. However, where's the Lord? Wei Ci smiled innocently. "I'm just scaring you." Feng Zhen was speechless. How could he have been so blind to have such a close friend? What a scam! Feng Zhen silently recited the mind-clearing mantra several times before he resisted the urge to strangle Wei Ci. As they neared the door, Feng Zhen suddenly said, "Zixiao, do you think the old master will really give up power?" Jiang Pingji had been in the limelight in recent years, but Lu Shi had been famous for a long time and was now in his prime. Would he really be willing to give up power to his daughter? It's hard to say. Wei Ci lowered his eyelids and sneered coldly. But with the Lord's temperament, he has always done things even though he knows it's impossible. If the old master is a smart man, he will make the most correct choice. How can that bastard compete with the Lord? Although Lu Shi was different from his previous life, Wei Ci could not be at ease with him. However, his lord did not react at all. She trusted Lu Shi, so Wei Ci could not say anything. The two of them conversed in low voices. They came face to face with a handsome brown-haired youth with a silly smile on his face. "Sirs, wait a moment." Wei Ci and Feng Zhen stopped in their tracks. When they looked, they saw that it was Li Yun, who was beaming with success. "Sirs, can you give me some advice?" Feng Zhen teased him. "What advice?" "I would like to propose marriage to the Lord," Li Yun said and nodded his head solemnly. Wei Ci, who was at the side, trembled and froze on the spot. He slowly tilted his head to look at him. His ink-like eyes carried a chilly intent. Chapter 866. Unbeknownst to him, Li Yun was still smiling brightly. "My father has already asked for the Lord's opinion. Now he's just short of visiting her personally, but I—" The smile on Li Yun's face was unbearable to Wei Ci. "I keep feeling that I need to prepare something more. Both of you are experienced and knowledgeable, why don't you give me some pointers?" "Oh, is that so?" Wei Ci chuckled softly. Li Yun inexplicably felt a tingling chill run down his spine. The chill left as quickly as it came, quickly disappearing without a trace. Feng Zhen was a shrewd man. He acutely noticed that Wei Ci's emotions were a little off, but Li Yun, the simple-minded youth, was too slow to notice. He had an idea. He tiptoed and rested his hand on Li Yun's shoulder. He teased him with a smile. "Han Mei is already a man in his 20s. He should have started a family long ago. This is a rare joyous occasion in Wanzhou. It must be a grand affair. It must be done in a lively and joyous manner." Wei Ci's thoughts went astray for a moment, but Feng Zhen would not misunderstand. There were indeed a lot of bachelors in Wanzhou. Now that Li Yun was leaving the group, it was a joyous occasion. Come. Let me, an experienced man, give you a few pointers. There's no use asking Zixiao. He's still facing a big problem himself. Feng Zhen and Li Yun put their arms around Li Yun's shoulders, a mischievous smile on their faces. Li Yun subconsciously felt that Feng Zhen was unreliable, but he was not wrong. Although Feng Zhen was unrestrained, he was still a married man. He had a well-behaved, adorable, and sensible son. What about Wei Ci? It was true that he was gentle and humble, but he was still a bachelor. Asking for pointers on such matters was indeed a little irrational. "Please enlighten me, Mr. Feng," Li Yun said obediently. Feng Zhen glanced at Wei Ci out of the corner of his eye. He saw that Wei Ci's brows were furrowed, and there was a hint of forbearance and restraint between his brows. He laughed inwardly. Men should get married when they're of age, and women should get married when they're of age. The two of you are in love with each other. This is truly a golden marriage bestowed by the heavens. Feng Zhen pretended to exaggerate, wishing that he could praise Li Yun and Shangguan Wan to the heavens. Li Yun, an unmarried young lad, blushed and was so embarrassed that he didn't even know where to place his hands. Feng Zhen even said, "Han Mei, listen to me. You only need to run to the Lord and express your sincere and passionate feelings to the person you love. Believe me, no woman in this world can resist such a passionate and unrestrained confession." Li Yun was so embarrassed that he felt as if smoke was about to come out of his head. He had also said implicit words of love to Shangguan Wan before, but he had never said them so bluntly. Who would have thought that Mr. Feng, who appeared to be a debauchee, was actually a passionate person? His petite body hid a bold and unrestrained soul. Li Yun said shyly in a low voice, "Isn't this too offensive? I'm afraid that Lord will despise me and say that I've offended a beauty." Feng Zhen laughed and said, "What are you afraid of? A chaste woman is afraid of a clingy man. She might say you're rude, but who knows how shy and happy she is in her heart." Li Yun was about to nod when he heard Wei Ci reprimand him while suppressing his anger. How rude, how impudent! Li Yun was stunned. He turned to look at Wei Ci, but all he could see was the other's back as he turned to leave and his wide sleeves fluttering in the wind. "This is... Mr. Wei, this is..." Once a mild-mannered person got angry, the scene was rather frightening. Even though Li Yun was valiant and brave, he was also shocked at this moment. He didn't know how he had angered the other. Feng Zhen restrained the emotions in his eyes and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a profound smile. Li Yun muttered, Mr. Wei has always been self-restrained and polite. Mr. Feng's words just now must have displeased him. Indeed, such a solemn event as a marriage proposal should be carried out with respect and not blindly guided by Mr. Feng. Feng Zhen heard Li Yun's mutterings and scoffed lightly. He said, "Concern leads to confusion. Even he, Wei Zixiao, is no exception." Li Yun continued to be confused, not understanding what Feng Zhen meant. Feng Zhen saw that his brain wasn't working properly and gave him a loving look, as if he was looking at his own silly and adorable son. If you don't understand, then don't think too much. It's useless even if you understand. Since the Lord has already agreed to your marriage with Wan Yangzi, and Wan Yangzi has feelings for you, you just need to follow the old tradition of the 3 letters and 6 rites and do it step by step. I'll be waiting to drink your wedding wine. Li Yun was dejected. After going around in circles, Feng Zhen still hadn't come up with any good ideas. After easily dismissing Li Yun, Feng Zhen was so worried that he paced in circles 3 times. Feng Zhen knew that with Wei Si's brain, even if his IQ went offline, it would only be for a short period of time. Once Wei Si had time to calm down, he would definitely realize that he had made a mistake. Thinking of this, Feng Zhen hurriedly chased after Wei Si and shamelessly went to his house. I didn't expect this. Feng Zhen hadn't even entered the main hall, but he was already filled with excitement, as if he had discovered a new continent. Didn't expect what? Wei Si had been back for a while. He knelt near the table and stared coldly at the boiling tea stove. He already knew that Feng Zhen would come, but he was secretly annoyed at himself for not being patient enough to have such a stupid misunderstanding. I really didn't expect that you, Wei Zixiao, would have such thoughts about your lord. Feng Zhen lightly slapped the table. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to make one's heart tremble. When Wei Si heard this, he suddenly raised his head. His ink-black eyes contained an undisguised sharpness. Sure, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. When did I ever have any disrespectful thoughts about my lord? Feng Zhen had a smile on his face as he sat beside Wei Si. Just disrespectful thoughts? Feng Zhen wouldn't let this opportunity slip by. It was rare to see Wei Si being forced into a corner. No matter what, he had to enjoy it. He said aggressively, no matter who it was, when they first heard that Han Mei wanted to propose marriage to my lord, the first thought that came to mind was that he wanted to propose marriage to my lord and marry Shangguanwan. But you're different. Your first thought was that Han Mei wanted to propose marriage to my lord and marry her. Do you think it's reasonable to say that you don't have any other thoughts about my lord? Wei Si opened his mouth. His secret thoughts had been exposed by Feng Zhen, and for a moment, he didn't know how to refute. His glib tongue that flowed like a river didn't have any effect on him at all. Absurd. He could only spit out these 2 words. Feng Zhen, who had been imposing just a moment ago, raised his hand and put it around Wei Si's shoulder the next second, looking like a good brother. My lord isn't married, and you aren't either. Isn't it normal to have such thoughts? Feng Zhen said. Why are you so secretive about it? Look, you almost scared the little angel Han Mei just now. Wei Si raised his hand and brushed Feng Zhen's hand away. His expression was dark and solemn, and he looked at Feng Zhen with even more vigor. How can a person like my lord be disrespected so easily? I don't want to hear such words from you again. Si and my lord are innocent. Chapter 867. Wei Si said, My lord, you have yet to succeed in your hegemony. You should not be hindered by this kind of love affair. At this moment, Feng Zhen made an inelegant gesture of using his little finger to pick at his ear, directly outsmarting Wei Si. Did you hear that right? According to Zixiao's meaning, doesn't that mean that the lord and you are a couple and have an affair? Feng Zhen looked as if he had discovered a new continent. He said, Just now, I only said that you secretly admired the lord, but I never said how the lord reacted to you. Why is it that you and the lord are in love with each other? Could it be that there's more to it? Wei Si's face paled. He realized in hindsight that he had been tricked by Feng Zhen and was furious. If not for his good upbringing, he would have long lost control of his impulse and kicked Feng Zhen out of the house. You have a beautiful face and a charming body. You deserve to be loved by others. For example, Xianxia, don't you have many women in your boudoir? There was a hint of slyness in Feng Zhen's eyes as he admired Wei Si's fairy-like face with great interest, revealing the annoyance and shame that only a mortal man could have. He continued, "My lord is not an ordinary woman, but she is also a person of flesh and blood. Outstanding women were chased by men, and outstanding men were chased by women. This was a matter of course. The pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. Taking advantage of the fact that no one has an advantage over you, it's better to make a move early than later when she has her eyes on someone else. The only thing is that I'm afraid only you can marry a woman like Lord." Wei Si. After a while, Wei Si squeezed his molars and squeezed out a sentence. "Prodigal Feng Zhen, your words and actions really live up to your nickname." When Wei Si flared up, Li Yun would be frightened, but not Feng Zhen. "I'm just teasing you. Why are you so serious?" Feng Zhen curled his lips in an unrefined manner. He said, "My lord is currently 18 years old. In another 2 years, he should be thinking about marriage. Do you really think that she is an immortal banished from the heavens, living in the wind, eating and drinking dew, with no distractions in her heart and no emotions?" Taking 10,000 steps back, Zishao had placed his lord on a pedestal, but had he ever thought of an heir? I will have to face this problem one day. As an outsider, Feng Zhen naturally saw things more clearly than Wei Si. He could also tell that Wei Si did not treat Jiang Pingji as his lord. He clearly worshipped her as a god. Who knew that the gods in Wei Si's eyes were ultimately just mortals with flesh and blood? Feng Zhen's words calmed Wei Si's raging flames for a while. "Carrying on the family line is a common human thing," Wei Si said dejectedly. "I have never had any improper thoughts towards my lord." It was Feng Zhen's turn to be confused. Adoration was adoration, what was there to avoid about it? Wei Si was about to drown in a jar of vinegar over the blunder just now, but now he refused to admit it. How was this a man who was so bashful? She was clearly a little princess. Feng Zhen said angrily, "I really don't know what you're conflicted about." He said to Feng Zhen, "There are some things you won't understand until the time comes." With his previous life's experience, Wei Si knew that this matter was not as simple as love between a man and a woman. It involved many entanglements of interests. If his lord was not the final victor and was destined to fail, what was wrong with Wei Si going all out and confessing his feelings? But he knew that was impossible. His lord would definitely win, and she would create an unprecedented golden age for all the people in the world. Wei Si did not want to be a stain on her reputation and give those gossipy people a reason to attack her. If possible, he hoped that he could stand by her side and quietly sweep away the pebbles for her, so that she could walk more steadily. Feng Zhen wanted to tease him a little more, but he saw Wei Si's deep frown. The pain on his face did not seem fake, so he could only stop. He was a prodigal son. How could he understand the principle that the more Wei Si liked and admired, the more he dared not approach? "Huh? It won't be you. It will always be someone else." Feng Zhen folded his hands into his sleeves. Every word he said was like a knife stabbing into Wei Si's heart. "Just now, Han Mei only made a slip of the tongue, and you're already so jealous. When the nightmare comes true, hee," Feng Zhen added, "why can't you understand?" Wei Si responded with silence. The prodigal son said, "I don't understand what you're worried about, but if you think about it carefully, I guess I can guess a thing or two. You're just worried about the gossip of others and the fight for the heirs in the future? It's not difficult to talk about it. Why don't you just change your surname and marry into her family?" Wei Si was speechless. To prevent Feng Zhen from going too far, Wei Si could not bear it anymore and said, "It's not just that." Feng Zhen asked, "Then what is it?" Wei Si rubbed his brows and said, "Do you think it's possible for my lord to become the emperor?" Feng Zhen thought for a while and said, "If she can successfully get rid of the calamity of the northern borderline, my lord will be able to add 9 pebbles and become her own emperor. If she could conquer the northern borderline, plus half of Dongqing's territory, it would not be too much to make her own emperor." Wei Si asked again, If a woman becomes the emperor, will her husband be the ruler? Feng Zhen instinctively wanted to reply, ridiculous, but he suddenly paused. Wei Ci smiled bitterly and said, if her husband is the ruler, it will undoubtedly be the ruling family of the empress. The country will not rule the country, and the so-called emperor will become a joke. The important officials of the court can tolerate one empress, but can they tolerate 2 or even 3? If the throne is passed to a prince, the fight between the empress relatives will become more and more intense. As you can see, the aristocratic families are at their peak and have military power in their hands. If a male emperor ascends the throne, the harem will become a channel for the aristocratic families to control the emperor. No matter what they do, it will be wrong. It's still a little far to talk about this now, but it will have to be faced eventually. Feng Zhen was stunned. He really did not think so much. Wait, according to what you're saying, is it better to let my lord be childless for the rest of her life? Or should I say, when my lord conquers the world, she will then adopt her brother's son and forcibly hand over the world? How is that possible? Wei Ci's eyes were cold and he said, getting rid of the father and keeping the son is the best way. After hearing this, Feng Zhen's eyelids twitched violently. Wei Ci said, forget it, why talk about such a distant matter? If you have nothing else, go home as soon as possible. Wei Ci felt that standing in front of him was an eyesore. Feng Zhen could hear the disdain in Wei Ci's words, but he still shamelessly stayed, thinking about what Wei Ci had said earlier. If my lord could really aspire to the throne, having children would indeed be a problem. In addition, Wei Ci's words also mentioned the problem of the aristocratic families. Nowadays, there were many aristocratic families with armies. It would be fine in troubled times, but if the world gradually moved towards unification, it would become a hidden danger of division again. With my lord's temperament, how could she like to be held back by others? Either she would completely weaken the aristocratic families, or they would retaliate and turn them into mere puppets. The interests of the two were completely opposite, and there was almost no possibility of reconciliation. Feng Zhen frowned and thought of many hypotheses. Wei Ci, who was beside him, had already calmed down. He took down the teapot on the tea stove and showed off his tea skills. Chapter 868. Feng Zhen, who had been tricked by Wei Ci, pondered for a long time but still had no clue. Wei Ci even kindly made him a cup of tea. Thank you, Feng Zhen thanked him as he accepted it. Just as his lips touched the rim of the cup, he suddenly realized that it was not right. He had almost been fooled by Wei Zixiao. She looked up and saw Wei Ci's frowning eyebrows. His eyes, which seemed to be painted black, flickered with a dense gloominess. Seeing this, Feng Zhen's heart softened. He swallowed the words that were stuck in his throat and did not continue to make things difficult for Wei Ci. I'm tired, so I decided to stay in your residence for a while. Feng Zhen's eyes turned as another idea popped into his mind. He said shamelessly, in the past, you and I used to sleep together and talk through the night about world affairs. Now that I think about it, it's been so long. Wei Ci glanced at him out of the corner of his eye and said, there are still guest rooms in the residence that are empty. It was not that Wei Ci was stingy, but Feng Zhen's sleeping posture was comparable to Lu Zheng's. He was also someone who slept from the head of the bed to the end. Feng Zhen was small and weak, but he was very thick-skinned. He coaxed and pestered his way to Wei Ci's master bedroom. While Wei Ci was taking a shower, he unrestrained took off his clothes, leaving only his pajamas on, and hurriedly rolled into the bed. Wei Ci was a bit of a neat freak. The bed was regularly washed and changed. Even in this sweaty weather, the bed was still clean and tidy, emitting a fresh and natural fragrance. No matter what, it was much better than Feng Zhen's doghole-like bedroom. By the time Wei Ci washed up and was ready to sleep, Feng Zhen had already fallen asleep with his limbs spread out. His clothes were slightly open and his hair was messy. He was sprawled out, taking up most of the space. The weather was still hot and it was easy to sweat. Feng Zhen did not even take a shower and just rolled onto his bed. Wei Ci thought to himself that when Feng Zhen woke up, he would definitely wash this mattress 3 to 5 times. Wei Ci was wearing white pajamas and lay on his side on the other side of the bed. Drowsiness overwhelmed him and his consciousness slowly drifted into dreamland. At this moment, Feng Zhen deliberately lowered his voice and asked, Zixiao? Zixiao? Are you still awake? Wei Ci struggled to open his eyes and answered vaguely, What is it? Feng Zhen said, Speaking of sleeping together, I suddenly thought of something. You and the Lord seem to have once shared the same bed and slept together? Wei Ci narrowed his eyes as he listened, but he was highly vigilant about anything related to Jiang Pingji. When he understood the content of Feng Zhen's question, he was so shocked that his entire body quivered, and all his sleepiness was gone. Feng Zisher, if you don't want to sleep, you should go back to your house earlier. Feng Zhen supported his cheek with one hand and turned sideways to look at Wei Ci. That flawless, jade-like face was now filled with complicated emotions. There was embarrassment and shock, as well as the fear of having his secret exposed. It had to be said that this greatly satisfied Feng Zhen's bad taste. I'm not leaving. Feng Zhen shamelessly crawled onto the bed and hugged the pillow with both hands. Suddenly, his fingertips touched a roll of something. He reached out and carefully touched it, taking out the scroll. It was actually a scroll that had been carefully put away by someone. Without waiting for him to react, Wei Ci's expression changed again, and he uncharacteristically pounced on him. Feng Zhen instinctively dodged and avoided Wei Ci. Relying on his agility, he ran away with the scroll. He didn't want to open the scroll, but Wei Ci's reaction was too abnormal. The precious thing on the bedside, could it be the fire-repelling painting that you usually look at for fun? Feng Zhen escaped quickly and opened the painting quickly. Wei Ci was afraid to take action, so he couldn't catch up to him. Feng Zisher. Wei Ci was so angry that he took the long sword by the side of the bed and unsheathed it. Feng Zhen was so frightened that his hair stood on end. Was he serious? Feng Zhen quickly glanced at the contents of the painting. When he saw it clearly, he looked at Wei Ci with a strange expression. There was no other reason. The woman in the painting was none other than Jiang Pingji. The woman in the painting was sleeping on a flower. The strokes were exquisite and realistic. It was completely different from the current freehand brushwork. This painting was more realistic. The woman's eyelashes were long and slender. Her eyelids trembled slightly, as if she was about to open her tipsy eyes and reveal a pair of clear, watery eyes. That wasn't all, but the woman in the painting was dressed very boldly. It was completely different from the current conservative creative style. Her sleeves were narrow, revealing 2 snow-white wrists. The hem of her skirt was huge, as gorgeous as a blooming peony. In comparison, the hem of her skirt was a little short. It only covered her calves, revealing 2 slender feet. 2 silver rings with bells hung on her slender ankles. The woman was sleeping soundly on the ground because she was drunk. Her sleeping petals were scattered around, making the white look whiter and the red redder. The surrounding rockery overlapped, and the environment was remote and quiet. Here, there was such a breathtaking scene, as if he had seen it with his own eyes. Feng Zhen glanced at the time of the inscription and raised his eyebrows fearlessly. My lord was only 12 years old at that time, and you already had so many thoughts? The date of the painting was 6 years ago, the first month after Wei Ci's rebirth. At that time, the beauty was sleeping and in full bloom. Wei Ci saw the fallen petals all over the ground. Memories of the past flashed before his eyes. He couldn't bear it and drew. Now that he thought about it, he regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. Feng Zhen had always been someone who couldn't keep his mouth shut. It was hard to say when he would reveal a word or two to his lord. Although Wei Ci's disguise had long been stripped bare in front of Jiang Pingji, he still harbored some hope. Take it back. Wei Ci pointed his sword at Feng Zhen, feeling even more anxious. Although Feng Zhen wasn't afraid of death, he understood the principle of moderation. He couldn't force Wei Ci into a corner. Even a rabbit would bite when it was cornered, not to mention that Wei Ci's swordsmanship wasn't bad. Fine, I'll return it to you. Feng Zhen didn't dare to throw the painting over. Instead, he rolled it up and handed it back to Wei Ci. However, he said, I've never seen anyone more hesitant than you. You were still denying it just now. Now that the evidence is irrefutable, I don't know what else you can say. Not only did he draw such a painting in private, he even hid it next to the pillow in the master bedroom. What was he thinking? Did he even need to analyze it? Wei Si sheathed the sword in his hand, but the gloominess on his face didn't dissipate. Feng Zhen suddenly asked with a smile, "Are you afraid of death?" Wei Si had just said that getting rid of the father and keeping the son was the best solution. Now that he was pleased with his lord, he couldn't help but think too much. Of course, Feng Zhen knew Wei Si's temperament. It was impossible for him to be afraid of death. Feng Zhen calmly prepared to listen to Wei Si's explanation. Looking at his embarrassed expression, he didn't expect Wei Si to look absent-minded. If I was afraid, I wouldn't have killed myself back then. Wei Si had barely managed to shut his mouth and did not manage to say the last word, kill. Otherwise, with Feng Zhen's ability to cause trouble, wouldn't he get to the bottom of it? Feng Zhen saw that the alarm had been lifted and immediately became fearless. Chapter 869. If he wasn't even afraid of death, what else was there to be afraid of? Wei Si was distracted by Feng Zhen. He was a little tempted, but he suppressed it with his rationality. It's still too early. Feng Longzi found out about this. Wei Si was mentally prepared for it to be widely publicized. Now that the Lord's hegemony has just taken off, it's really not appropriate to consider personal relationships. If others know about this, not only will the outside world be talking about it, but I'm afraid the Lord's strategists and generals will also have other thoughts. Wei Si couldn't help but warn Feng Zhen. Feng Zhen was in a particularly good mood now that he had something on Wei Si. Is it that serious? Knowing that Feng Zhen was deliberately playing dumb, Wei Si still had to explain patiently. It's much more serious than that. The human heart was sinister, and they were not stingy with using the most despicable and sinister thoughts to speculate about others. Most of the people were ignorant. Once someone took the lead, it wouldn't take long for the affairs of the Lord and her subordinates to be spread everywhere. Open your mouth to start a rumor, but run your legs to refute it. Wei Si could totally imagine how embarrassing the unofficial history would be and how nasty the people would say it. This was just the outside world. Wanzhou would also be in turmoil because of this. Wei Si being roasted on the fire was secondary. He was afraid that some people would be indignant and think that Jiang Pingji always gave Wei Si preferential treatment. Once people had such thoughts, there would be more conflicts, and the people's hearts would be scattered. The power in Wanzhou would no longer be united and stable as before. After his rebirth, Wei Si analyzed his past life many times from the perspective of an outsider. Each time, he made different discoveries and comprehensions. In his past life, the Lord treated her subordinates fairly, rewarded and punished appropriately, and was clear about rewards and punishments. This was one of her strengths. If he wanted to strive for the throne again, this advantage had to be continued. Feng Zhen said tactfully, "Zixiao, you don't trust me? Tell me what you can, and never reveal a word about what you can't." Wei Si snorted. Of course, he knew that Feng Zhen seemed to be unrestrained, but he was actually very careful. "I hope so." Feng Zhen said to Wei Si, "I've always felt that something was wrong. Although you didn't say anything, I always felt that you had a lot on your mind. You're sensitive and thoughtful. This is both your strength and your weakness. If there's something that's hard to say, you can tell me. Why do you have to suffer?" No matter what sorrowful things were, once they were spoken, they would feel carefree. Wei Si sneered coldly. If he were to treat Feng Zhen as someone he could confide in, wouldn't the other party be able to grasp hold of his weaknesses? If Feng Zhen threatened him with this and asked him to cover for him, help him skip work, secretly drink, and visit brothels, what should he do? Don't think that Feng Zhen wouldn't do something like that. Wei Si knew very well what kind of unreliable things Feng Longzi had done in his previous life. He bullied Li Yun, Dian Yan and the other generals, who were all honest people. He cheated them of their salary to buy wine and often skipped work. His crimes were too numerous to list. Happiness should be enjoyed in time. How can it be delayed? Feng Zhen said, "When people live to 100 years old, what they seek is to be free and unfettered, to enjoy themselves in the moment. Therefore, he could not understand why Wei Ci was so cautious and indecisive, hoping to have the best of both worlds, but in the end he could not get anything good from either end. He who is sensitive and thinks too much will not live long. Perhaps there were more inside stories that he did not know, but from what Feng Zhen could see, if Wei Ci continued on like this, he would only hurt himself and others. No, not necessarily hurting others, but definitely hurting oneself. He rolled up the blanket and went to sleep, leaving Wei Ci stunned on the spot with a thoughtful look on his face. On the other side, Li Yun also obediently hired an iceman to hunt a pair of wild geese. The 3 letters and 6 rights were all there. Due to the special circumstances, the whole process only took about half a month. Cheng Jing completed the task that Huang Song had given him perfectly. He had quietly returned with a secret letter from Jiang Pingji and did not attend the wedding. Although time was tight, Jiang Pingji did not mistreat Shangguan. Everything that needed to be prepared had been prepared for her. It was as if she was marrying her younger sister. Speaking of marrying her younger sister, Jiang Pingji was also experienced. She only cared about the overall situation, and the other details would be taken care of by others. A few days before the wedding, the smile on Li Yun's face never disappeared. Not only did he walk with the wind, but he also floated. However, Shangguan was perturbed and restless. She always felt that everything now was beautiful like an illusory dream. Once this dream was pierced, she would be beaten back to the cruel reality and continue to be a widow who was tortured by others and could not see a future. In the words of the livestream's audience, this was called premarital anxiety. Jiang Pingji was busy with work, so she could only entrust Hui Jun to help her ease Shangguan's worries, so that Wan would not overthink things. Hui Jun's thoughts were exquisite and incisive. Every sentence she said hit the nail on Shangguan's head, and the knot in her heart was easily resolved. Under the anxious anticipation of the 2 newlyweds, the day of the wedding finally arrived. As the first bachelor in the Wanzhou group to get rid of a single partner, Li Yun was not only handsome and likable, but he was also popular, so basically all the colleagues who could attend were present. Feng Jin's wife, Wei Jingxian, even played the role of a blessed wife and helped Shangguan wring her face. Sister Jingxian, I'm a little nervous. Shangguan was no longer that immature girl. The last time she got married, she felt that she was not attending a wedding, but her own funeral. But today, her little heart was thumping uncontrollably, making her feel helpless and flustered. Today is the wedding, so you can't speak carelessly, Wei Jingxian said with a smile. Forget everything that happened in the past. Shangguan was still nervous. She involuntarily clenched her hands under her wide sleeves, leaving shallow fingernail marks on her palms. Li Yun came to fetch the bride on time, and the smile on his face became even more radiant. His life goals were very simple: to take care of his master, marry a wife, and have children. Now that he had both, he was naturally beaming with happiness, smiling so widely that only his teeth could be seen. Feng Jin's Changxing and Feng Zhen's Feng Yi became virgins. Changxing was still young, so she happily rolled around on the bed in the bridal room a few times. Feng Zhen's only son, Feng Yi, on the other hand, kept a straight face and silently sat on the bedding. He stayed for a while symbolically before coming down. Feng Yi was the child of Feng Zhen's deceased wife. His appearance was like Feng Zhen's, but his temperament was like his mother's, extremely reserved. Because he was born prematurely, Feng Yi was slightly weaker than Feng Zhen and rarely appeared in front of others. When the crowd saw Feng Yi, they were so shocked that they forgot how to speak. A guy like Feng Zhen, who had no boundaries, actually gave birth to a serious and refined son. It was a genetic mutation. Hello, uncles. Feng Yi bowed obediently. At such a young age, he already had the demeanor of a gentleman. Today is Uncle Hanmei's big day. You don't have to be so formal. Feng Zhen caressed his son's hair and casually dismissed him. He had no choice. With his own son by his side, he couldn't drink to his heart's content. You have to have the demeanor of an elder brother. Don't bully the weak. Feng Yi looked frail, but his demeanor was excellent. He really lived up to the name Feng Zhen had given him. The crowd was dumbfounded. They thought that a prodigal son like Fengzhen would give birth to a son who was extremely daring and dared to dance on his grave. But what happened? Good bamboo shoots come from evil bamboo. Fengzhen's face immediately darkened. Who was he calling an evil bamboo? Wanzhou was extraordinarily lively, but elsewhere, the atmosphere was extremely solemn. You don't like it? Lu Shi held a letter in his hand. It had been sent urgently by someone from Jiangpingji half a month ago. In front of him knelt a handsome young man of about 13 or 14 years old. His facial features were somewhat similar to Jiangpingji's. Your son wouldn't dare. That's good, Lu Shi said. He picked up his pen and wrote a word at the end of the letter. Chapter 870. Today was Han Mei's wedding day. Jiangpingji released a notice a few days in advance. The viewers on the red bullet screen were already rubbing their palms and rubbing their hands. They displayed the super fast hand speed that they had gained from being single for more than 20 years. Under the mad scramble, the ratio between red and blue reached 24:1. There was a total of 816,000 viewers in the 850,000 live stream channel. Even so, there were still quite a number of red bullet screen viewers who complained about the blue bullet screen. When Su Ku and Xuanmei got married, Jiangpingji was only a level 4 streamer, and the upper limit of her streaming room was only 150,000 viewers. When it was Li Yun and Shangguan Wan's turn to get married, Jiangpingji was already a level 6 streamer. The upper limit of her streaming room had reached 850,000 viewers. One could totally imagine how crazy the rewards on this day were. Not to mention the small rewards, the large rewards that were announced in the live broadcast room were even more explosive. They filled every corner of the live broadcast screen and did not stop for a long time. If the audience did not block the reward effects, they would not be able to see the live stream at all. The blue bullet screen viewers were so shocked by such a grand occasion that they could not close their mouths. It was a wedding between two people who had nothing to do with each other, yet they did not broadcast the actual scene of the bridal chamber. What were these lunatics so happy about? The viewers in the red bullet screen indicated that they were willing. Jinyang Wenv, I'm heartbroken. My husband is going to marry another woman, and I still have to give him a wedding gift. How miserable. After sending this bullet comment, the nouveau riche waved his hand and threw out 99 luxurious private helicopters. Zigai Dongdongzui, I'm different from you sluts. I'm marrying my son. As soon as the bullet comments were sent, a similarly generous tip was sent out, with a thoughtful message. This is the dowry for the little angel Han Mei. Li Yun's beauty value was high, her temper was good, and her personality was contrasting with her cuteness. She fiercely poked the cuteness points of girlfriend fans and mother fans. What was even more frightening was that these people were not only willful, they were also filthy rich. Apart from the earthquake in Shangjing, Jiangpingji had never taken the initiative to ask for rewards from the audience. As a result, over the years, many viewers complained that they had nowhere to spend the money in their pockets. Now that he finally had a legitimate opportunity to throw money around, why wouldn't he give it his all? They also wanted to let the other live streams know that their live stream also had a local tycoon. Lao Cg Lianmeng. In the blink of an eye, even the single dog Li Yun is married. Streamer, are you still not considering pushing beauty CI? Soon after, countless bullet screens copied this sentence. Jiangpingji could not help but laugh when the screen was full of messages urging her to get married. Host V, the frog isn't cooked yet? I'll tell you the good news when it's cooked. Jiangpingji watched as the MC presided over the wedding ceremony while she chatted with the audience in the streaming room. She chose the topics that she was more interested in to answer. Sinusi, host, you've received so many tips today. Aren't you going to consider giving Han Mei, the little angel, a raise? Host V, of course I'll get a raise. I converted some of it into gold and silver for Wan Er's dowry. I even wrapped a big red envelope for Han Mei. Jiangpingji rarely interacted with the audience. Seeing that she was in a good mood that day, many people in the streaming room spoke up enthusiastically. Hallelujah! By the way, today is Angel Han Mei's wedding. As the host, you can't just increase your salary. Host V: That's true, so I've prepared another super big gift pack. It's definitely a surprise. Jiang Pingji smiled mysteriously. The salted fish's curiosity was piqued. However, she kept them guessing and refused to divulge any information. The wedding this time was very different from the weddings that the audience had in mind. The most obvious difference was that the bride did not have to wait in the bridal chamber. They could change into wedding clothes and socialize with the guests together with their husbands. Jiang Pingji was chatting privately with the audience when two newlyweds came to her and toasted. Looking at the joyful Li Yun and the bashful Shangguan Wan, she suddenly had the illusion that she was marrying off her daughter after her son was married. After drinking the wine, Jiang Pingji suddenly said, "I've sent a special gift to both of your residences. You can open it tomorrow and have a look. Remember, you can't look at it today. That thing, it's a little inauspicious. I'm afraid it'll spoil your happiness." Li Yun and Shangguan Wan were puzzled, but Jiang Pingji had specifically instructed them not to deliberately disobey. Because Li Yun's alcohol tolerance was not very good, his colleagues did not make things too difficult for him. At least he could stagger into the bridal chamber and not pass out drunk, leaving the bride to guard the bridal chamber alone. Shangguan Wan and the maidservants supported Li Yun to the bridal chamber. Changxing, who was fooling around at the side, saw it and wanted to join in on the fun with her short legs. A gentleman should not look at indecent things. Feng Yi laboriously carried her back and placed her beside Qiguan Rang's daughter. Although Changxing was not young, her weight was not light. In just a few steps, Feng Yi was so tired that he was panting slightly. Feng Yi said matter-of-factly, "Because I'm a gentleman." Compared to the lively and active Changxing, Qiguan Rang's daughter was much quieter. She did not like to speak and was a little shy. "What is a gentleman?" Changxing could speak coherently now, but her pronunciation was not very clear. "Not doing things that should not be done." Feng Yi lifted his eyelids slightly and glanced at Changxing's plump and fleshy face. He wanted to pinch it, but he restrained himself. Feng Zhen, who was standing at the side, could tell what his son was thinking. He pinched Changxing's cheeks in front of his son, causing Feng Yi to widen his eyes. There was some rebuke in his eyes. "Take good care of the two little sisters." Feng Zhen was satisfied to see the change in his son's expression. It was much livelier than before. Wei Ci saw the interaction between the father and son and shook his head in amusement. After laughing, there was some worry in the bottom of his eyes. If he remembered correctly, Feng Zhen's only son, Feng Yi, died before he was 10. Speaking of the reason for Feng Yi's premature death, it was rather sad. At that time, Feng Zhen was already in his 30s. He listened to the instigation of others and mistakenly believed that hanshi powder had the effect of strengthening the body and bones. One time, the powder acted up and was accidentally seen by Feng Yi. Feng Yi was young and did not understand. He thought that Feng Zhen was seriously ill and was at death's door. He panicked and hurriedly went to find a doctor, who knew that the ground was covered with dense moss. When Feng Yi ran, he accidentally fell and slid into the pond in the courtyard. Feng Yi was a premature baby and his physique was much weaker than his father's. It was still early spring then. The cold wind blew and the pond water was bone-chilling. Feng Yi suddenly fell into the water and naturally fell sick. The illness went deep into his lungs. In less than 2 days, he died prematurely. Now, Feng Zhen had already quit using hanshi powder. Maybe Feng Yi could grow up smoothly? However, if Feng Yi grew up smoothly, would Feng Zhen still have the idea of remarrying and giving birth to Feng Yu with the second wife? Without Feng Yu, wouldn't there be one less trustworthy person to assist Jiang Yan? Speaking of which, Feng Yu could be considered his son-in-law in his previous life. Perhaps he had too much to drink. Wei Se muttered something. It was coincidentally heard by Feng Zhen, who had sharp ears. "What Feng Yu?" Wei Ci was already 80 to 90% drunk. He said, "Don't let your Feng Yu harm my Yenan." Feng Zhen laughed. "Who is Feng Yu? Who is Yan?" Wei Ci said, "Your son, my daughter." Feng Zhen. Chapter 871. TSK, daydreaming isn't considered a skill. If you're really capable, you should express your feelings to the Lord. Feng Zhen shook his head and pushed the drunk Wei Ci to the side, continuing to drink with the others. On the other side, the newlyweds in the bridal room were so nervous that their palms were sweating. The two of them drank the nuptial wine, not daring to look at each other for a long time, as if one more look would set them on fire. Shangguan stammered to find a topic, suddenly remembering Jiang Pingji's mysterious gift. Li Yun's mind was filled with thoughts of his sweetheart. How would he have the time to be curious about the guest's gift? It's getting late, why don't we rest early? Every minute of the night was worth 1,000 pieces of gold, it couldn't be wasted. Her voice was like the buzz of a mosquito, as light as a swan feather, but it was heavenly music to Li Yun's ears. He couldn't help but carry her in his arms. Not long after, unbearable panting could be heard in the dimly lit bridal room. The next day, the bride served tea. Looking at his married son, Xie Qian's heart was filled with emotions. Jiang Pingji considerately gave the young couple a wedding leave, letting them be lovey-dovey. Shangguan was still thinking about the mysterious gift Jiang Pingji mentioned, and Li Yun was happy to open the gift with her. Is this the gift from Lanting? Shangguan looked at the square box in front of her. It was the size of 2 men's palms. Look at the stick on it, this should be the gift the Lord mentioned. Open it and take a look. Li Yun smiled as he opened the gift. When he opened the box and saw what was inside, the two newlyweds turned pale. Shangguan was so shocked that she took half a step back. There was nothing else in the box, only an urn made of cinerary ash. A newlywed's giving an urn? This is definitely not Lanting's doing. Shangguan snapped out of her trance and said firmly, "Who packed the gift yesterday?" Someone must have changed Brother Lanting's gift to create a rift between Han Mei and the Lord. Li Yun's joy faded slightly. He hesitated for a moment, then lifted his hand to open the urn's lid. It was filled with white powder. He moved closer to smell it. It was indeed human ashes and not powder of similar color. Who is so evil? Han Mei, there's a note here. The paper was made of high-quality Xian paper. Most of the improved paper was supplied to Cheng's bookstore, and the rest was supplied to the district headquarters. Li Yun was reminded by Shangguan. He raised his hand to stop his newlywed wife from touching the unlucky ashes of a stranger. He stretched out 2 fingers, picked up the slip of paper, and slowly unfolded it. This is Lanting's handwriting. Shangguan worked as a clerk in the district headquarters, so she was very familiar with Jiang Pingji's handwriting. She read out the words on the note. This is the ashes of the evildoer from Zhongzhou, who killed Han Mei's mother. Today, I present it to congratulate you on your wedding. Shangguan was taken aback. She looked up at Li Yun. His young and handsome face was full of forbearance and restraint, only his eyes were slightly red. Han Mei. As if awakened from a dream, Li Yun hurriedly covered the urn and carried it to look for Xie Qian. Xie Qian was still in a daze in the main hall, reminiscing about his late wife. If it weren't for that evildoer's possession, perhaps today, his deceased wife would also be able to drink the tea served by the new bride. Just as he was feeling sad, his mischievous child ran over in a hurry, carrying an urn of ashes. Xie Qian's expression was unbearable. This mischievous child, of all things, was he playing with an urn of ashes? Who did he want to curse to die? Before Xie Qian could react, Li Yun carried the urn of ashes and knelt down in front of him. What is this? Xie Qian felt like he was about to have a stroke. He was infuriated by his mischievous child. Father, the Lord said that this is the enemy who killed my birth mother. What? Xie Qian couldn't react for a moment. His expression changed, but his brain couldn't react at all. Suddenly, Xie Qian thought of the yin-yang jade pendant that Jiang Pingji had borrowed for 2 days. He didn't know what to feel. He hoped that the ashes belonged to that evildoer, but he was also suspicious of the truth. Xie Qian couldn't be blamed for his suspicions. No matter who it was, everyone would have their suspicions. The enemy who had been gnashing his teeth for close to 20 years was killed so easily? Han Mei, put it away. Father wants to go and ask about it. If it's true, Your mother's spirit in heaven can rest in peace. Li Yun nodded heavily. Xie Qian hurriedly went to look for Jiang Pingji. She seemed to be prepared and wasn't surprised by his arrival. That evildoer was really executed? Xie Qian couldn't believe it. The hatred that had been in his heart for so many years was easily resolved. Jiang Pingji said, "Of course it's true. I'll tell you about that evildoer's appearance and characteristics, then you'll know if it's true or not." She had a very good memory. Not to mention people she had met several times, even if she had only seen them once, she could still describe the person's appearance and characteristics. Xie Qian became more agitated as he listened. In the end, he fell to the ground and burst into tears, unable to control himself. Jiang Pingji waited for Xie Qian's emotions to calm down, then said hesitantly, "There's something that's hard to say." Xie Qian's eyes were red. He gritted his teeth and said, "Magistrate Lu, please say it. If there's anything I can help with, Xie Xiaohe is willing to go through water and tread on fire for you. It's not a big deal. It's just that this jade pendant is of some use to me. I wonder if you're willing to part with it." Previously, she said she would borrow it for 2 days, but she shamelessly borrowed it for half a month. Luckily, Xie Qian didn't ask for it from her. Xie Qian thought it was something big. To Xie Qian, this jade pendant was a locator to locate his enemy. Now that his enemy had been reduced to ashes, the yin-yang jade pendant had no other use for him. Jiang Pingji asked him for this useless jade pendant. Of course, he wouldn't refuse. "Thank you. This thing is of great use to me." As for what use it was, Jiang Pingji didn't reveal anything to Xie Qian. As a considerate lord, Jiang Pingji gave Li Yun and his wife half a month off from their wedding. It wasn't until Chongzhou sent an urgent letter that she summoned Li Yun and Shang Guanwan back. At that moment, Wei Ci had already returned to Shangjing to continue supervising the construction of the provincial government. Jiang Pingji summoned all the people who were left behind to the government office and announced something to them. "Father plans to retire behind the scenes. I'll take over Chongzhou and Hu County." When Qiguan Rang heard this, he stopped waving his feather fan. His lord's efficiency was indescribable, but he looked around and couldn't bear to look straight at the scene. He moved his feather fan higher and blocked his eyes. The group of military officials looked confused. They couldn't react to what had happened. The rest of the civil officials looked as if the sky was falling and the earth was collapsing. "Oh my God! Someone's going to die." They already felt that they were too busy to manage such a large Wanzhou. It wasn't easy for everything to be on the right track, and the Lord's territory had suddenly expanded. There was an extreme lack of capable people, especially Yang Si. He felt his vision go black and his soul almost left his body. She had finally finished her official duties in other places and wanted to come back for a breather. She was stunned by the news before she could even sit down. "What? Is it so sudden?" Jiang Pingji said, "It's better to be prepared in advance." Their opponent was the north borderline. If they didn't make preparations, sooner or later they would fail miserably. Yang Si said with some difficulty, "But Chongzhou and Hu County? I'm afraid it won't be easy to intervene." Lu Shi had managed Chongzhou for 4 to 5 years and Hu County for more than 10 years. The people under him might not be willing to listen to Jiang Pingji. "Even if it's not easy to intervene, we have to intervene. Whoever dares to resist, will just find a reason to get rid of them." Jiang Pingji's gaze was somewhat fierce. There was no second person who would dare to take the lead in resisting and looking for trouble. Chapter 872. He felt a toothache. How did he end up with such a lord? Yi grumbled in his heart, but did not show it on his face. Ari stepped forward and said, "My lord, if that's the case, I'm afraid it will put you in a difficult position." "Oh? What's so difficult about it for me?" Yang Si said helplessly, "The old master has been in Chongzhou for many years. Hu County was managed by him. The former is still manageable, but the latter are probably the old master's trusted subordinates. These two places have their own rules. If we interfere decisively, those old men will take advantage of their seniority and bring this matter to the old master. Won't we drive a wedge between the lord and the old master?" Lu Shi was willing to step back, but it did not mean that he had completely disappeared from the face of the earth. Would the old men who had followed Lu Shi by Jiang Pengji's account and not secretly trip her up? If this problem was not solved, no matter how good the father-daughter relationship was, it would not be able to withstand the discord and instigation. Sooner or later, there would be trouble. Since ancient times, how many fathers and sons did not get along and brothers fought each other? Jiang Pengji lifted her eyelids and said, "Father has already stepped back. All the matters of Chongzhou and Hu County are decided by me. Those old men want to take advantage of their seniority in front of me. Even father can't protect them. I will make things clear to father." Yang Si heaved a sigh of relief and said, "That's good." Jiang Pengji asked around, "Are there any other questions?" Everyone did not speak. It was obvious that there were no objections. They knew very well that they would have to fight with the north borderline sooner or later. If the Lord was willing to plan early, it was better than making a last-minute effort. The generals were already in a daze. Their slow brains finally connected with the others, and they were secretly delighted. In their opinion, the Lord would take over the power of Chongzhou and Hu County. The busiest people would definitely be civil servants. Little did they know that working overtime was a group activity. No one could escape. After a while, Jiang Pengji said to the crowd, "I don't have any objections for now. Take a look at this." Shi gestured to Wana. Wana got the order and stood up with a smile. She distributed several booklets to everyone. Shangguan Wan was not only the administrator of the women's department of the government office, but she was also the female teacher of Wanzhou Academy. Ever since Xie Qian had fled from Zhongzhou to Wanzhou with Wan Xian, Jiang Pengji had abducted this great scholar of Zhongzhou to enlighten the students of the academy. In order to take over Shangguan Wan's teaching job, she selected someone from the women's department of the government office and asked her to teach the female students of the academy. After the divorce, not only did Li Yun return to work, even Shangguan Wan returned to the government office and became Jiang Pengji's assistant. Li Yun anxiously watched as his wife walked in front of him and handed him a booklet bound with fine thread. He reached out to take it and secretly stroked Shangguan Wan's delicate and soft hand with his fingers. His heart fluttered, but unfortunately, he was woken up by her slap. You're not serious." Shangguan Wan muttered softly. Li Yun felt wronged. Ignoring this interlude, Shangguan Wan distributed everyone's booklets, then returned to her original position and sat up straight. He tilted his head and asked Li Yun, "Han Mei, what's written here?" Everyone's level of education was different, but Dian Yan was completely illiterate. Li Yun looked at Dian Yan's booklet, then looked at his own booklet. Strangely, he found that the contents of the booklets were exactly the same. The so-called exactly the same was not only the content of the words, but even the size, shape, and horizontal and vertical strokes of each word were the same. Even he noticed this problem, not to mention the other meticulous strategists. Among them, some already knew the reason, such as Qiguan Rang and Su Ku, while others were full of doubts. Jiang Pengji said, "I know what all of you are doubtful about. We'll talk about this later." Everyone. Do you know what was the most hateful thing? She refused to continue halfway through her sentence. Everyone could only suppress their curiosity and carefully read the contents of the booklet. Judging from the handwriting, this was their lord's handwriting. From today onwards to the war at the north borderline, the contents are the difficult problems that we will have to overcome in the next few years. In order for you to have a clearer and more intuitive understanding, I've listed them one by one according to the major and minor items, Jiang Pengji said. The three major items are governance, farming, and training the troops. Let's talk about governance first. Everyone present is a pillar of humanity, but everyone only has a pair of hands, not 3 heads and 6 arms. If it's just Wanzhou, everyone can still handle it with ease. If Chongzhou and Hu County are added, they will be stretched thin and will not be able to handle it. Therefore, I'd like to seek your opinion on whether we should choose a suitable time to issue the recruitment notice. Qiguan Rang and the others did not speak, but their inner voices were the same, send. If they did not issue the recruitment notice and recruit fresh blood, these old people would die of exhaustion at the desk. However, something like the recruitment notice was not something that could be issued as one wished. If the contents of the recruitment notice were not satisfactory, the scholars of the world might not be willing to buy it. Therefore, everyone recommended Feng Jin, who was the most talented in literature, and the heavy responsibility was directly placed on him. Feng Jin secretly laughed and cried. He stepped out to ask for details. He was just a ghostwriter when it came to writing the recruitment notice. The core ideas were still provided by the Lord. Jiang Pingji thought about it and said, regardless of your status, only talent is important. As soon as she said that, everyone was silent. Feng Jin's expression also froze for a moment, but he quickly recovered and calmed down. In the current selection system, the people selected must have a noble family background and must also have the rigid conditions of benevolence, righteousness, filial piety, and fraternity. Take Dongqing's evaluation system as an example. Family background, virtue, and knowledge belonged to the top 3 categories. Appearance, ability, and temperament belonged to the bottom 3 categories. Among the top 3 categories, family background and virtue accounted for 90%, and knowledge only accounted for 10%. In other words, if you reincarnated with your eyes wide open and reincarnated well, even if you were born with a mental disability, you would be many times more noble than countless poor students. If the two were placed together, the imperial court would also prioritize the former over the latter. Jiang Pingji looked around and asked coldly, "Why? Do you have any objections?" Her team had gone through strict selection. Except for Feng Jin, who was tall, rich, and handsome, the others were only tall, and, from the perspective of a poor scholar, they could not possibly object to Jiang Pingji's suggestion. Regardless of your status, only talent is important. How many poor scholars' hearts were expressed in these few words? Many poor scholars did not lack ability, but their family background was not good enough. They did not even have the ticket to become a fish that leaped through the dragon's gate. Feng Jin's expression was normal as he said, "I have no objections." The others echoed one after another. "I think you all have no objections." Jiang Pingji spoke the truth. She said, "Talented people can help you lighten your burden and help you move forward. Useless people without talent will only add another burden to your heavy work. Do you think what I said is reasonable?" Everyone was speechless. Chapter 873. The time was still too short. If Jiang Pingji was given another 1 or 2 years, she would be able to cultivate a group of talents with a basic foundation. As for the core talents, the cultivation period was even longer. She could only use the recruitment order to recruit people who would be loyal to her. Archiguan Rang lowered his head and flipped through the book. He saw that there were a few smaller items behind the main item, governance. The recruitment order was one of the smaller items, followed by the words, bookstore. Jiang Pingji said, "I'm afraid that the recruitment order alone won't be able to tempt the scholars in the world, so I plan to announce an important decision." Everyone's heart skipped a beat. When their lord did not cause trouble, the trouble she caused could make them tremble in fear. Now it was obvious that she was going to cause trouble. How could it be a small matter? Jiang Pingji did not say anything else. She gestured for Shengguan Wan to fetch the things. They were also carried on plates, but the previous books were light and thin. The books that were brought up now were all very heavy. These books are for the children of the academy to start learning. In addition to the main text, there are also annotations carefully organized by Mr. Chengqing. Hearing his father's name, Qing Yuan's eyes lit up. After getting a book, he hurriedly opened it. After reading the contents, Qing Yuan understood why his father always walked with the wind, as if he was radiating the second spring of his life. The words in the main text were relatively thick, only a little smaller than a copper coin. It looked very easy to read, neither laborious nor harmful to the eyes. The words in the annotations were smaller and more detailed than the main text. The content was all in the vernacular. Even an ordinary person could understand it after reading it once. In addition, there were small strange symbols between each sentence. Feng Jin vaguely discovered something. He could not wait to read it again in a low voice. When he encountered those strange symbols, he subconsciously paused. He suddenly understood the function of the symbols. They were all used to punctuate sentences. Looking at the repeated symbols, he suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. It was obvious that these symbols were not scribbled. Each symbol represented a specific meaning. Not only Feng Jin, but Yang Si and the others also noticed it. Archiguan Rang forcibly suppressed his surging emotions. His fingers swiped across the pages and he quickly flipped through a few pages. He discovered that this primer was not empty talk. The format was uniform. It could be 3 words in a sentence or 4 words in a line. It was easy to read. The text was popular, easy to read, and easy to remember. It included common sense, traditional sinology, historical stories, and positive life principles. These books were naturally the 3-character classic, 100 family surnames, and other teaching materials that Jiang Pingji had obtained from the audience many years ago. However, other than the 100 family names, Jiang Pingji had changed the other teaching materials beyond recognition. Because the history of the audience's dimension was different from the history of her world, many phrases and allusions could not be used. Jiang Pingji had a good memory and could be said to be well-read. She simply followed the template and modified it. Not only did she have to eliminate the non-existent allusions, but she also had to eliminate the extreme and ignorant thoughts one by one. Extract the essence and discard the dregs. After some major changes, she also added a lot of content about this world, such as the deeds of Su Gong of the previous dynasty. She gave the draft after the major changes to Cheng Cheng. Cheng Cheng read it and was so excited that he could not control himself. He made a second major change to the teaching materials. Taking the 3-character classic as an example, the original version of the teaching materials had more than 1,100 words. After Jiang Pingji and Cheng Cheng worked together to make major changes, it was expanded to 3,656 words. Cheng Cheng even asked the Zhongzhou great scholar Wan Xian to annotate it and clarify the meaning of each sentence. After some changes, the first edition of the basic teaching materials had a total of 21 books. After a cursory look, there was only one thought in everyone's mind. This set of books was enough to make people go bankrupt, right? Don't think that they were exaggerating. If Jiang Pingji did not play around with rice paper, going bankrupt would be considered a light punishment. Nowadays, the mainstream writing materials were mainly bamboo slips. The more extravagant people used silk books, and the more extravagant people used bamboo paper. In fact, before the appearance of bamboo paper in Hejian, the nobles and gentry used the valuable Kai-Ho paper. Bamboo paper was technically improved on the basis of Kai-Ho paper. It was by no means the first. Otherwise, how could Gu Min keep such a precious paper-making technique? Bamboo paper had a material limitation and was difficult to mass-produce. Jiang Pingji's rice paper was made from sandalwood. The rice paper produced was better than what the audience had imagined. As for sandalwood, it had a strong vitality and a short growth cycle. After the sapling was planted, it could be used as raw material for rice paper in 2 or 3 years. Chongzhou was full of sandalwood. This was one of the reasons why Jiang Pingji asked Lu Shi to go to Chongzhou. In other words, the value of this set of books was far less than what everyone had imagined. After everyone had roughly looked through it, Jiang Pingji said, "This set of books will be the teaching materials for the Academy's students to use in the future." No one had any objections, only Dianyan had one. My lord, can I also go to the Academy to study for a few days? Dianyan worked hard to learn words, but learning was not something that could be seen in a day or two. He still had to train his troops and did not have much time. However, seeing such a large set of books, he felt that he had to squeeze some time to learn even if he did not have time. He wanted to keep this set of books properly and pass it down as a family heirloom. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "There is no end to learning. Deputy Captain Dian has such an ambition. Naturally, it is worth encouraging." Dianyan blushed slightly. He secretly decided that he would not let his lord down. Shi continued, "This set of books is not only for the students to use as a starting point, but I also plan to use it as a gift to the world's famous scholars. Archiguan Rang glanced at the contents of the title page of the three-character classic and immediately understood his lord's intention. He could not help but smile. The title page was very clean. There were only a few elegant words: author, Wang Lin, Lu Shi, commentator, Cheng Cheng. Jiang Pingji did not want to add her name, but there was no such person as Wang Lin in the world. She could not clearly say that Wang Lin was the original author of the three-character classic. In order to shut everyone's mouths, after some hesitation, she could only say that she had met this person by chance and obtained inspiration from him. The other teaching materials for beginners were handled in the same way. Archiguan Rang had to admit that his lord was a person with great courage. This set of books was given to the world's famous scholars, not for anything else but for one thing: to create momentum. Once the world's famous scholars approved of it, this set of books would be pushed to the altar. Similarly, those who left their names on this set of books would be pushed to the altar. They would truly become gods in one fell swoop. What did the world's scholars desire the most? It was only fame and fortune. The so-called famous scholars, in layman's terms, were those who had fame but did not become officials. Among this group of people, some were truly noble and had unquestionable integrity. They did not want to become officials. Some wanted to become officials but did not have the qualifications. They could only find another way to make a name for themselves. As long as they had a reputation, there would naturally be people coming to claim them. Once they accepted the claim, they would enter the official career. However, being an official was only a temporary pleasure. How could it compare to writing books and becoming famous throughout the ages? Chapter 874. Famous Scholars? Except for a few people who saw through Jiang Pingji's plan, everyone else felt their hearts ache. This set of books was definitely a treasure that was hard to find. It was more than enough to be a family heirloom. Their lord was rich and overbearing. Not only did she want to donate it to the academy, but she also wanted to give it away for free. In their opinion, the cost of this set was no less than 200,000 strings of coins. How could she give it away just like that? Ardian Yen and the others felt their hearts ache. Their cheeks twitched slightly. They wanted to say something to stop her, but none of them knew how to persuade their lord not to squander. Meng Hun, who had been in the background, opened his mouth. He asked in surprise, "Does my lord want to use this set of books to attract famous scholars?" If that was the case, the price was too high. Rin Dongxing alone, there were no less than 500 famous scholars who were well known. If everyone was given a set, according to the sky-high cost of 200,000 strings of coins, wouldn't the lord suffer a huge loss? Meng Hun had seen many so-called famous scholars, with Meng Zhan. In his opinion, most of these people were embroidered pillows. They looked good but were useless. They had nothing to do all day. They gathered together to sing praises, grieve for the coming of spring, and pretend to be coy. They obviously wanted to be an official, but they pretended to be aloof and arrogant. To be honest, they were not good at other things, but they were eloquent and good at gossiping. Artio put it bluntly, many of these famous scholars were more like celebrities. Their ability to get things done left people in the dust. However, did the lord need such embroidered pillows? Jiang Pingji laughed and said, "It's just a set of books. How can it attract all the famous scholars in the world? This is just a stepping stone." In Jiang Pingji's opinion, the group of famous scholars was a publicity platform. This set of rudimentary books was in their hands. Through their mouths, it would spread at the fastest speed. However, this was only the first step of Jiang Pingji's plan. Just a stepping stone? Meng Hun's heart trembled. Of course. Famous people have their own pride. Ordinary things can't move them. Jiang Pingji smiled maliciously and said, "We don't need to spend a lot of money. We just need to send them these beginners' textbooks. Smart people will know what to do." Everyone was speechless. This set of teaching materials were all made from the incomparably precious fine Xian paper. There were 21 books in a set, which was far more expensive than gold and silver. Not only was his master a prodigal, but she was also not very good at arithmetic. The generals were heartbroken. Only a few civil officials remained unmoved. Qiguanrang smiled and said, "My lord is right. If this primer could be put into practice, it would be able to teach all the students in the world, and they could be called the teachers of the world. Not only will his name spread far and wide, his name will also be immortalized for generations to come." Archie purposely emphasized the last sentence. After the general heard this, he vaguely understood, and his complexion became much better. From ancient times till now, only Kong Xing could be called a teacher of all ages. From then on, all scholars set this as their highest goal in life. But who succeeded? Revan, the world-famous teacher, Master Yuan Jing, who taught many students and whose literary names spread throughout the 5 countries, was still not qualified. If this set of beginners' textbooks could be truly perfected and enlighten the people, those who left their names in it were destined to be immortalized for generations to come. Our smart people could see the great wealth hidden in it, but stupid people would think it was just children's books. Jiang Pingji gave this set of books to the scholars not only to advertise herself, but also to tell them that there was a cake in Wanzhou. This is only the first step. We need to attract talented scholars of virtue and prestige to come and compile the teaching materials together. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "I have a second step here. Which scholar in the world doesn't want to write books? It's just that they don't have the means to do so. How many precious manuscripts have been lost? I have an idea. When we send out the teaching materials, we will announce to the world that we are willing to open the bookstore to publish books for scholars. There will be 20 copies of each book. As a reward for publishing the books, the bookstore will keep 10 copies of the samples. If you don't want to keep the samples, you can only pay for it yourself." This idea could be said to be bold. As soon as she said this, the civil officials who were originally calm could not stay calm. This was not something else, it was publishing a book. Which scholar in the world didn't want their ideas and crystallization to be passed down to future generations? If beginners' textbooks could attract famous scholars to join, then writing books could attract the hearts of countless knowledgeable scholars from poor families. At a time when the aristocratic families monopolized the market, the cake that Jiang Pingji threw out was too attractive. It would definitely make countless scholars fight to the death for it. Revan, though Feng Jin and the others were mentally prepared, when they heard Jiang Pingji's words, their hearts still could not help but beat wildly. Everyone said, "My lord is very kind." Feng Jin's reaction was still considered calm, but Su Ku, Yang Si, and the others' eyes were dark red and bloodshot. Wrongly they knew the pain of the scholars from poor families. The aristocratic families monopolized knowledge and education, thus monopolizing the official positions and power in the court. Why did people always say, "It is difficult for a poor family to produce a noble son"? Was it because the children from poor families were all mentally retarded? Not true. The children from poor families wanted to study, but they could not even find a book. How could the illiterate be a match for the noble son who was well-read? Jiang Pingji's move was undoubtedly carrying a mace and giving a blow to the aristocratic families. Why were the aristocratic families so powerful? It was because they held the most important knowledge in their hands. Every aristocratic family had countless precious books and books. They were born with conditions that ordinary people could not have. After many years of development, the aristocratic families had disciples and officials all over the world. Their power was deeply rooted, and they were united by blood relatives, cutting off the path of advancement for the scholars from poor families. If the sons of concubines from poor families wanted to stand out, they often had to rely on the aristocratic families, be humble, and endure humiliation. Artio put it bluntly, it was a distorted and deformed hierarchy of power. If there was any wealth in the world that was shared by the whole world, it was undoubtedly the written word. Jiang Pingji knew that her actions would cause a lot of resistance. Perhaps it would even cause the aristocratic families to group together and attack her. But this was not important. When Yang Si thought of this matter, his heart sank. He said hesitantly, "My lord, should we postpone this matter? If it is suddenly spread, I am afraid it will cause controversy among the scholars in the world." Yang Si did not want Jiang Pingji to be hurt because of this. If she fell, there would be no hope for the poor families. Our Jiang Pingji sneered and said, "Then let them talk. A dog that bites doesn't bark, and a dog that barks doesn't bite. Your lord is rich. I am willing to be a sucker and publish books for others. Why should they be jealous? I have discussed this matter with Mr. Chung Ching many times and have already set a general plan. In addition to the first two steps, I have a third step, which is to set up a book club that is free and open to the public." Chapter 875. After careful discussion with Mr. Chung Cheng, I plan to open the library to the public so that all scholars can enter. Our Jiang Pingji said this because there was a similar library in the previous dynasty called the Golden Scale Library. The Golden Scale Library was proposed by Prime Minister Huang Fu-xiu of the previous dynasty. Its original purpose was to benefit the scholars of poor families. However, since Prime Minister Huang Fu's death and his body was dismembered and cooked, the Golden Scale Library became a place that only the nobles were qualified to enter. Our Jiang Pingji now proposed to build a library similar to the Golden Scale Library. Presumably, all the scholars of poor families in the world would respond. Previously I said that I would help people write books. With the consent of the people involved, the samples they leave behind will also be added to the library. Or we can specially open such a place for people to communicate and discuss. Jiang Pingji was sure that if these three things were done well, Wanzhou would become the holy land in the hearts of the scholars of the world. When that time came, she would slowly choose and not worry about not having enough talents. After saying this, Jiang Pingji began to select people. Archiguan Rang and Feng Zhen went to Chongzhou. Yang Si went to Hu County. Su Ku and Feng Jin stayed behind to manage Wanzhou. Lu Shi agreed to retreat behind the scenes and give all power to Jiang Pingji, but whether she could completely conquer Chongzhou would depend on her ability. Archiguan Rang was from Chongzhou. He was very familiar with the situation there. Feng Zhen looked unreliable, but in fact he was very scheming. When the two of them worked together, it would be difficult for others to take advantage of them. The local nobles in Hu County had been beaten by Lu Shi, so it was relatively easy to conquer. Yang Si could handle it alone. Su Ku and Feng Jin had a tacit understanding. Jiang Pingji was very relieved to let them stay in the base camp. After talking about management, let's talk about stationing the fields. Since ancient times, before the troops and horses moved, provisions and fodder came first. With sufficient provisions and fodder, there would be confidence in fighting a war. Jiang Pingji said, "Stationing the fields has begun to show results. Before Zixiao went to Shangjing, he gave me many suggestions. I think it is feasible. I plan to open up a wasteland of fertile farmland in Chongzhou and station troops there on a large scale. In this way, not only will we be able to relieve the pressure on our supplies, but we will also be able to shorten the length of our supply lines." Archiguan Rang and Feng Zhen had already heard Wei Si talk about the matter of Chongzhou's farming. Naturally, they had no objections. The others secretly calculated and agreed with this proposal. If they didn't farm, they wouldn't have been able to raise such a large army. After many rounds of recruitment, Wanzhou now had 60,000 soldiers and horses, and the size of the female battalion had also expanded to 7,000. This was the result of Jiang Pingji deliberately raising the bar. If they did not reject anyone, their military strength could reach more than 100,000. Within the borders of Dongqing, Jiang Pingji was the undisputed ruler of the north. Li Yun asked, "Is there any ownerless wasteland in Chongzhou that can be cultivated?" Because of excessive land annexation, a lot of land is private property of the wealthy families. This time, the scale of the farm should be quite large. If there isn't enough land, I'm afraid it won't work. Jiang Pingji smirked. "We'll talk about it when the time comes. The location of the field can only be decided after a field inspection." If the local tyrants were smart, she didn't mind a win-win cooperation. If they were not sensible, she could only seize the field by force. Originally, Wei Si was in charge of it. However, Wei Si had already gone to Shangjing to supervise the construction of the provincial government. Now, he was divided and unable to do anything. Our Jiang Pingji thought about it and named Li Yun. She asked him to take on the role of Chongzhou's military officer of agriculture and specifically deal with this matter. Our Li Yun Kai happily agreed. There were only so many details about the field. Jiang Pingji changed the topic to training soldiers. When it came to training soldiers, the group of generals seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. One by one, they were full of energy. Jiang Pingji asked them about the progress of the training of new recruits one by one and received satisfactory responses. In 5 years at the latest, we will go to war with the northern borderline. Jiang Pingji started talking. The generals couldn't help but perk up their ears and listen attentively. They were afraid of missing a word. I think everyone is clear about the strength of the northern borderline's cavalry. They move quickly and deploy their troops flexibly, but they also have obvious disadvantages. I intend to take advantage of this disadvantage and specially train the army to restrain the cavalry. I have proposed this before, but the scale of the training is too small and the results are not great. Now, we will really implement this and officially divide the army. The northern borderline relies too much on the cavalry. The army is very monotonous. Their speed is indeed very fast, but they are not invincible. They also have fatal weaknesses. First, their defense is not strong. Second, the army is too monotonous. Once they encounter a specialized army, there is almost no way to turn the situation around. Jiang Pingji intends to officially divide the army into different types and increase the diversity of the army. This will also allow more flexible deployment and command on the battlefield. In order to restrain the cavalry, Jiang Pingji came up with a lot of targeted plans. There are military formations, army types, defensive equipment, and more insidious traps. Everyone turned the page of the booklet in their hands. Suddenly, they felt a chill down their backs. There was only one thought in their minds: how difficult is it for our Lord to get along with the cavalry? Looking at the content written by Jiang Pingji, they thought about it a little and couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat for the northern borderline cavalry. First, let's talk about military formations. The booklet drew a simple fish scale formation. The heavy infantry were to hold shields and spears and form a square formation similar to fish scales. Jiang Pingji had led more than 100 soldiers to sneak into Jimen Pass and break out of the encirclement. The military formation they used could be regarded as a small fish scale formation. However, the northern borderline cavalry is mostly light cavalry in cloth clothes or rattan armor. They are very mobile. If the enemy is not surrounded, this kind of fish scale formation is not very effective. Then there is the spear formation that everyone is more familiar with. The advantages of the spear formation are obvious, but so are its weaknesses. However, Jiang Pingji previously proposed to divide the army types and let the different types cooperate to make up for each other's shortcomings. In this way, the spear formation is not without merit. Speaking of military formations, there are also ferocious crossbowmen. They use the improved crossbows that Jiang Pingji has improved several times before. Jiang Pingji's original troops all used the improved crossbows. Over the years, she has developed many ways to cooperate in battle. It is quite effective. In addition to the improved crossbows, the army also has the ballista. It has a long range, great power, and high lethality. It can cause great damage to the charging northern borderline cavalry. In addition to these, there are other gadgets, such as the barricade spear and the iron caltrops. The barricade spear can be arranged in front of the army to block the charging horses and prevent the cavalry from charging. The iron caltrops have 4 sides. No matter how you look at them, there will be one side facing up. They are sprinkled on the enemy's charging path and slightly covered with grass and trees. If a horse steps on them, the iron caltrops will pierce into the horse's hooves, almost crippling the horse. In the booklet, they also saw 2 new weapons with new designs. One is shaped like a sickle, specially used to cut the horse's legs. The other is thick and mighty, named Samadeo. Jiang Pingji intends to train special forces, about 5,000 of them, to fight against the northern borderline's warhorses. are compared to the ability to fight on horseback. The northern borderline cavalry is not good at fighting on foot. Chapter 876. The political situation was turbulent and chaos arose. Zhongzhou was ambitious. They wanted to take advantage of the endless war between Nanxing and Dongqing to send troops to take advantage and expand their territory. However, they also had a head full of lawsuits. The internal struggle was unprecedentedly fierce, and the lives of the people were getting worse. Perhaps it was because they were nearing their end and followed in the footsteps of Nanxing and Zhongzhou. There were already several peasant armies that tried to rebel in Zhongzhou. However, the scale of the rebel army was too small. Before they could make any waves, they were brutally suppressed by the official army. The civil society was restless. The aristocratic families that had their own armies also had their own worries. There was a faint sign that the feudal lords were going to split. At this sensitive time, a shocking piece of news came out of the Zhongzhou palace. Empress Du was a wooden man who had turned into a demon. The ambitious feudal lords couldn't hold back and used this as an excuse to scold the current emperor for going against the grain and allowing a demon to harm the palace. They even spread the news. Who knew if the emperor, princes, and princesses in the palace were still human? This rumor spread quickly, and the already weakened imperial power was on the verge of collapse. Of course, the imperial family would never admit to this rumor and denied it. However, Empress Du was dead and the behavior of the imperial family was suspicious. The people were more and more convinced of the rumors about the wooden demon. The emperor ordered that after Empress Du died, she was not allowed to enter the imperial mausoleum or enjoy offerings. He also took back the golden seals that Empress Du had used when she was conferred the title. Although he didn't say that she was abolished, this treatment was no different from abolishing her. Within Zhongzhou, who didn't know that Empress Du was favored by the emperor? If she wasn't favored, how could Empress Du's 4 self-accomplishment classics for women be so popular in Zhongzhou? Now that Empress Du was dead, if there wasn't something fishy going on, why would the emperor treat the woman he once loved so cruelly? After some thought, the people's guess was actually very close to the truth. When Empress Du was unlucky, the Du family was the first to bear the brunt. The Du family was already starting to decline. Who knew that the virtuous Empress Du would appear? Her 4 self-accomplishment classics for women was praised by the world's famous scholars and was set as a role model for women. The Du family also benefited from it and couldn't help but feel elated. Even their bones became a few pounds lighter. Now that their backer had fallen and they had offended many aristocratic families with heavy military power, they would sooner or later be dealt with by others. Therefore, this branch of the Du family did not have an easy time. When they were in the limelight, everyone wanted to bask in the limelight. When they were in dire straits, any Tom, Dick, or Harry could kick them when they were down. Faced with the huge difference in their situation, many of the Du clansmen started to complain about Empress Du. However, the descendants of Emperor Du were all dead, and their corpses were nowhere to be found. With nowhere to vent their anger, they could only vent their anger on Du Wunyang. Du Wunyang was Feng Jin's eldest brother, Feng Gui's first wife, the original Madame Feng Du. After her separation from Feng Gui, she was safely sent back to Zhongzhou. According to the increasingly abnormal atmosphere in Zhongzhou, as a woman who had been chased out by her husband's family, she should be caught and drowned. However, she had Feng Gui's permission to release her wife. The person who sent her back was also a trusted aide whom Feng Gui had carefully selected. After a series of struggles, Du Wunyang barely managed to keep her life. She was casually sent to a Buddhist hall by Madame Du to become a nun. Du Wunyang hated Feng Gui in her heart. She had been thinking about how to use her family's influence to exert pressure on Feng Gui and make him welcome her back on his knees. However, the cruel reality hit her hard. Not to mention using her family's influence, if Feng Gui had not sent his trusted aide to deal with Madame Du, she would have long been tied up and drowned. Even so, she had never felt a shred of gratitude or remorse. Du Wunyang learned from Empress Du's style of doing things. She used her opponent as a stepping stone to climb to the top, thus earning her virtuous reputation. Now that Empress Du had passed away and the Du clan was implicated, Du Wunyang, who was in the Buddhist hall, was naturally not having a good time. They did not want her life, but they sent female servants to humiliate her every day. They even made ugly male servants watch her being humiliated. According to the contents of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women, Du Wunyang should have committed suicide to protect her reputation. However, just as Feng Gui had mocked, she had always been strict with others and lenient with herself. Her life was so important, how could she give it up so easily? She could use the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women to restrain others and suppress her opponents, but she would never use it to punish herself. Du Wunyang was in dire straits, but her ex-husband, Feng Gui, was unexpectedly blessed. Ever since Xiangyang County was taken over by Jiangpingji, the lives of the people in the county were guaranteed. Feng Gui finally did not have to be so busy that he could not return home. When he had more free time, he would devote himself to reading. Occasionally, he would go out to visit friends and participate in scholarly gatherings and poetry gatherings. He personally taught his 2 children how to read. With Du Wunyang as an example, Feng Gui personally asked about his 2 children's daily lives. One day, he had just returned from outside. There was already someone waiting for him outside the manor. Feng Gui was secretly surprised. He followed the person to see his father, Feng Ren. "Huai Zhang, come over and take a look at this." As soon as he entered, Feng Gui saw his father, Feng Ren, sitting on a mat. Beside him was a stack of books. Unlike the usual scroll-bound books that he was familiar with, these books were fastened with white thread. This is? Feng Gui walked forward and picked up one of the books. It felt smooth and cold to the touch. When he opened the title page, he saw a familiar name. He flipped through it again. The profound meaning inside was thought-provoking. Feng Gui came from a noble family that had been passed down for close to 1,000 years. After many years of accumulation, the family had a collection of more than 100,000 books. Feng Gui didn't dare to say that he had read all of them, but he had some impression of them. However, he was completely unfamiliar with the books in his hands. In other words, it was highly possible that these books were newly published. The newly published books even used expensive paper. It was extremely extravagant. "They were sent here from Wanzhou not long ago," Feng Ren said. "Second brother gave them to you?" Feng Gui was the first to think of his younger brother. Feng Ren shook his head and said, "That's not the case. These were given to me by the Wanzhou magistrate, Lu Shi. Not only do I have them, but other famous scholars also have them." When Feng Gui heard this, his expression cracked. Not to mention the contents of the books, just the paper alone was worth no less than 200,000 strings of coins. Even if Lu Shi owned a paper-making workshop and was very wealthy, he couldn't afford to squander like this, could he? Gifting one set wasn't enough, and he even gave it to other famous scholars? Feng Ren said, "Take a look at the contents." Feng Gui did as he was told and read carefully. Not long after, he was fascinated. Feng Ren snorted and said, "Lu Shi played a very big game of chess. The bait he threw out was too tempting." Feng Gui agreed with him. He could see clearly that the potential value of this set of books was immeasurable. Feng Ren threw another bomb at Feng Gui, causing him to be at a loss for what to do. The Wanzhou magistrate, Lu Shi, not only generously gifted books, but he also generously expressed his willingness to write books for the world's scholars, Feng Ren said. "Do you still remember the golden scale pavilion of the previous dynasty?" In his letter, Lu Shi mentioned that he wanted to rebuild the golden scale pavilion and provide it to the world's poor scholars for free. Currently, only I have received this letter. The others have only received books. Feng Gui lowered his gaze and said, "Lu Shi, this is..." Chapter 877. For the Feng family to be able to survive for thousands of years, other than strict family rules and noble family values, it was also due to their foresight. For example, Prime Minister Huangfu built the Golden Scale Pavilion in the previous dynasty. It was said to contain millions of books. Where did these millions of books come from? Other than the 30,000 books donated by Prime Minister Huangfu himself, The rest were donated by various aristocratic families. The Feng family had donated 100,000 books. Books were lifeless, but people were alive. It was precisely these 100,000 books that protected the Feng clan, allowing them to obtain another 200 years of prosperity. Compared to the other aristocratic families, the Feng family's style was different. If one were to compare those aristocratic families with armies to strong men with 8-packs, then the Feng family would be like a refined scholar with a tall hat and a wide belt. Not only did they look different, but their combat abilities were also on a different level. If it wasn't for the fact that they had so few troops, the Feng family wouldn't have had to hand it over to Jiang Pingji for the sake of the safety of Xiangyang County. Now, the Feng family was faced with the same choice. Lu Shi wants us to donate books? Feng Gray was a little angry. It wasn't that he was selfish and didn't want to donate books, but did Lu Shi have the right to do so? During the Xia dynasty, the Feng family was willing to donate 100,000 books in response to Prime Minister Huang Fu's call. More importantly, it was for the long-term future of the family. 100,000 books in exchange for more than 200 years of prosperity for the Feng clan. This was a very good deal. The Xia dynasty had unified the Central Plains, but Lu Shi had only occupied half of Dongqing. Prime Minister Huang Fu was extremely powerful and had power over the court. Compared to him, Lu Shi was nothing. If they donated the books to Lu Shi to enrich the Golden Scale Pavilion, what benefits would the Feng family get? Feng Gui's idea was exactly what Feng Ren had in mind. However, after his anger subsided, the sly old fox thought about it carefully and felt that this deal might work. Why Zhang, in Dongqing, besides Lu Shi, who else can stop the disaster of the north borderline? Feng Gui was silent. After a while, he said, "Besides her, there is only Lu Shi." Feng Ren said, "A few days ago, I received news that Lu Shi, that sly old fox, has chosen to retire. He has handed Chongzhou and Hu County over to Lu Shi." Feng Gui didn't say anything. The northern borderline has already matured. Although the horse plague has delayed it, it will probably recover in 3 to 5 years and send troops to Dongqing again. Look at the current situation. The royal family is struggling at death's door, and the other feudal vassals have their own armies and are independent. If the northern borderline took advantage of the situation and attacked, there would be internal chaos and external enemies. Who could stop the northern borderline iron cavalry? The Feng clan had been rooted in Xiangyang County for generations. If the northern borderline invaded, the Feng clan would not be able to protect themselves. Unless the entire family migrated and fled to another place. Speaking to this point, there was a hint of desolation in his voice. Now, the world was in chaos and wars were happening everywhere. If they escaped from Xiangyang County, where could they migrate to? In comparison, Lu Shi had managed Wanzhou in an orderly manner and had become a rare peaceful paradise for Dongqing. It was better for the Feng family to express goodwill to her and help her. Feng Gui understood the meaning behind his father's drawing and his expression changed. Father wants to help Lu Shi, that's not the case. Feng Ren didn't want to pick a side now. This was a decision that concerned the survival of the entire family. How could he make such a rash decision? Father, what do you mean by this? Feng Ren said, I'm just expressing my goodwill. Expressing goodwill didn't mean choosing a side. Strictly speaking, the Feng clan and Jiang Pingji had common interests. The stronger Jiang Pingji's power grew, the safer the Feng clan would be. Moreover, Feng Jin was Jiang Pingji's trusted confidant. With such a relationship, the two could be considered as natural allies. I want to bring the 10,000 books to Lu Shi first. Saying this, Feng Ren pointed at the set of beginner's textbooks. These books are very suitable for children to learn. His words seem simple, but they contain infinite logic. If we can implement them thoroughly, perhaps they can really open the minds of the people. The Feng clan wasn't without ambition, but their ambition was different from other clans. As a rare millennium-old aristocratic family, they only had one goal: to continue the family line. While the other aristocratic families were desperately gathering wealth, oppressing the people, and searching for treasures, the Feng clan adhered to their ancestral rules. They didn't fight or plunder, didn't touch military power, didn't make enemies everywhere, and didn't provoke resentment from the people by force or trickery. They wholeheartedly guarded the cultural wealth their ancestors had accumulated. Before the Xia dynasty was established, there was a chaotic era of 16 kingdoms that lasted for hundreds of years. How many prominent clans were destroyed at that time? Only the Feng clan of Xiangyang remained standing even though Xiangyang County had changed hands several times. After all, the millennium-old aristocratic families and the new nouveau riche had different ideologies. Feng Ren said, "I'll go take a look. It'll be a pity to miss such a good opportunity." Not to mention other things, just the set of books in front of him was enough to push Cheng Cheng to the top ranks of famous scholars. Before this, how many people had heard of Cheng Cheng's name? The cake was only so big. No matter what, the Feng clan had to take a bite or two. If Lu Shi was the final winner, this investment was definitely the best choice Feng Ren had made in his life. At the same time, many famous scholars in Dongqing also received this set of beginner's textbooks. Some people scoffed, but when they saw the names on the title page, they also felt jealous. Some people were so shocked that they couldn't wait to sleep with these books every day. At the same time, they used their connections to inquire about Lu Shi and the others. The topic was highly discussed, and so was its popularity. The names of Cheng Cheng and the others often appeared in big and small gatherings of famous scholars. Overnight, they became famous all over the world. After the public opinion fermented for a while, another piece of heavy news came crashing down. Write books and become famous immediately. How many scholars dreamed of this? This was a shortcut for countless famous scholars to further promote their literary names. The ancient times were not the modern times, where one could publish a book by spending tens of thousands of dollars. If one wanted to publish a book in the ancient times, one could not afford it even if they had a lot of money. Jiang Pingji's popularity was already very high. Now that such a big piece of news was revealed, people yearned to go to Wanzhou. This was not the end. When the news of Wanzhou investing money to rebuild the Jinling Pavilion spread, many aristocratic families looked at it coldly. The poor children were so excited that they could not control themselves. Jiang Pingji knew that this move would attract many talents, but she never thought that she would catch such a big fish. It was no longer a river fish. It was clearly a whale. "Greetings, master." Hearing that there was an ancient person visiting, Jiang Pingji was stunned for a moment. She immediately asked someone to invite him to the main hall. Seeing the person, even someone as calm as Jiang Pingji could not help but be shocked. She came back to her senses and quickly bowed to the person. The hale and hearty Master Yuanjing smiled and helped her up. He said gently, "Times are different now. Magistrate Lu is too polite. A teacher for a day is a father for life. It is my duty for a student to bow to a master." Jiang Pingji quickly adjusted her emotions, but her heart was still in turmoil. She never thought that she could catch such a big fish like Master Yuanjing. Wasn't this person unintentionally involved in the fight for the dukes? Was he wholeheartedly focused on guarding the academy and educating people? Now that he appeared in front of her, how could she not be surprised? Surprise! Surprise! Chapter 878. It turned out that Jiang Pingji had good taste. Master Yuanjing didn't come to help her. He was just interested in the beginner's teaching materials. She wasn't surprised by the result. Master Yuanjing was a highly respected teacher in Dongqing. He had taught many students for decades and had accumulated a wealth of teaching experience. With him, the value of the beginner's teaching materials would reach another level. It would be accepted and recognized by more people. If she spread the news that Master Yuanjing was coming to Wanzhou, it would attract more students to gather in Wanzhou. However, Jiang Pingji had to suppress the tempting idea to avoid Master Yuanjing's dislike. He wasn't willing to intervene in the battle between the feudal lords, so she couldn't make a decision on her own. "Master, you must be tired from the journey. I'll ask someone to help you settle down." After the small talk, Jiang Pingji saw that Master Yuanjing looked tired. She asked with concern, "Master, you came from Langyi County. It's a long journey. Why didn't you bring more people to serve you?" "I don't care about those things. Why would I need so many people to serve me? Mr. Yuanjing smiled and said, if I were 10 years younger, I would be able to travel alone. Now that I'm old, I've become a burden. Needless to say, when Master Yuanjing was young, he was also a ruthless person who fought along the way. He might be amiable now, but when he was young, he killed a few bandits. As they were talking, there were unfamiliar footsteps approaching. Jiang Pingji looked in the direction of the sound and saw a slightly plump young man standing outside. Seeing Jiang Pingji look at him, the young man was stunned. He immediately bowed respectfully. Jiang Pingji smiled. Senior Zuda, long time no see. Why are we so distant? The young man's surname was Tang. His first name was Yao. His courtesy name was Zuda. He and Jiang Pingji had a bad relationship. Back in the day, they had a conflict at Jishan Hot Spring in Shangjing. Tang Yao stood up for two playboys who had offended Jiang Pingji. Of course, the conflict ended with Jiang Pingji's victory. Master Yuanjing even reprimanded Tang Yao. Later, Jiang Pingji went to Langyi to study. Tang Yao didn't like her. Although he didn't deliberately cause trouble, he always treated her coldly. Jiang Pingji realized that he meant no harm, so she did not take it to heart. In Jiang Pingji's memory, Tang Yao was a young man born in a gentry family. He was proud of his family background and bloodline, and he worked hard to protect this honor. From Tang Yao's point of view, Jiang Pingji was a weirdo in the circle of the gentry. Looking at it that way, it made sense that Tang Yao did not like Jiang Pingji. Tang Yao stood outside, hesitating to enter. The expression on his face was slightly stiff, and he did not dare to make eye contact with Jiang Pingji. Master Yuanjing found it funny and called out, Zuda, come here. Tang Yao hesitated for a moment, but he did not dare to disobey his master's order. He walked steadily to Master Yuanjing's side and sat down. Master? Tang Yao bowed to Yuanjing, then turned to Jiang Pingji and said, Magistrate of Liuzhou. Jiang Pingji smiled. I haven't seen you for a few years. Senior Zuda has become more mature. After saying that, Tang Yao's expression slightly twitched, but he didn't dare to refute. Master Yuanjing smiled and said, Don't blame Zuda. He was shocked too. Surprised? It couldn't be. Was her face really that ugly? Master Yuanjing smiled and explained, A few months ago, I received news that Lanting is a girl. Zuda refused to believe it and insisted that it was slandered by others. Now that he saw Lanting in person, how could he not be shocked? Although she's a girl, she's still better than thousands of men. I see. In that case, it's my fault. Jiang Pingji recalled the 3 years she spent studying in Langyi County and could not help but laugh. There were probably many people who were as confused as Tang Yao. She studied in Langyi for 3 years. She thought she studied seriously, but in the eyes of others, she was still a model of ignorance and incompetence. There were even people who said she was a libertine who slept with prostitutes and secretly spread the rumor that she impregnated an unknown prostitute. Although it was a groundless rumor and there was no concrete evidence, it could be indirectly proved that Jiang Pingji's reputation in Langyi was not good. Even though Jiang Pingji had left Langyi, many places still spread her legend. When Jiang Pingji's identity was revealed, those people's faces were slapped swollen. She was a girl. No matter how much she slept with prostitutes, it was impossible for her to impregnate someone. As for the rumor of heartless men abandoning good girls, it was even more unfounded. The few people who liked to smear her reputation kept quiet out of fear and closed their doors. Master Yuanjing said, You have your own difficulties. How can I blame you? If there were no difficulties, who would hide their true identity for more than 10 years? Jiang Pingji smiled noncommittally. To facilitate the academic exchange between Master Yuanjing and Chengcheng, Jiang Pingji moved Master Yuanjing's residence near the latter. Just as Jiang Pingji had guessed, Master Yuanjing did not get involved in the government affairs of Wanzhou. Tang Yao, who was by Master Yuanjing's side, also behaved himself. He accompanied Master Yuanjing to visit Chengcheng every day. As soon as the two academic education maniacs met, it was as if the heavens had struck and the earth was on fire. The scene of the collision of ideas was like sparks and lightning. Every time the two of them talked excitedly, they would always forget to eat and sleep, as if they regretted not meeting each other earlier. Jiang Pingji gave a set of 21 beginner teaching materials, but in Master Yuanjing's eyes, something was still missing. Cheng Cheng respected the big shot in the educational world. If Master Yuanjing said something was missing, there must be something missing. However, the two discussed for a few days, but they could not grasp the inspiration, until Jiang Pingji visited them by chance. She heard Master Yuanjing and Cheng Cheng's doubts and said carefully, "The 6 skills of a gentleman are divided into rites, music, strategy, mathematics, calligraphy, and archery. The soldiers in the military camp are divided into different categories, such as infantry, cavalry, archers, and crossbowmen, so on and so forth. The beginner teaching materials naturally have to be carefully classified to differentiate the difficulty from easy to difficult. If all the content is mixed up and taught to the students at the same time, it will be too complicated. Secondly, even the teachers can't distinguish which students are good at. If they can't even distinguish this, how can they teach in accordance with their aptitude?" Master Yuanjing and Cheng Cheng were suddenly enlightened. They seemed to have broken through a bottleneck. Countless inspirations burst forth in their minds. The two of them gathered together and got busy again. They were so engrossed in it that they forgot everything else. They directly put Jiang Pingji aside. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Seeing the strange glint in their eyes, she secretly broke into a cold sweat for the students who would use the teaching materials in the future. No one paid attention to Jiang Pingji. She stayed for a while and was ready to leave. Tang Yao stood up to send her off. Tang Yao deliberately lagged behind and followed behind Jiang Pingji. Before entering the door, Tang Yao said, "Magistrate Lu, I have a question." Jiang Pingji stopped and looked at Tang Yao. "Senior brother Zuda, please ask away." Chapter 879. The audience in the streaming room had a good impression of Tang Yao. Seeing that he kept avoiding Jiang Pingji's gaze, they thought the young man had a crush on their cool streamer. Half a minute ago, they were still optimistic and mistakenly thought that Tang Yao wanted to confess. But, after hearing Tang Yao's words, many of them were furious. "Tang Yao, I'm so angry. Who does this kid think he is? Mo Ling, how dare he say that the little angel by the Lord's side is a humble person? Believe it or not, a bunch of red bean buns will teach him a lesson? Li Jia Macho, I feel that this kid is too naive. No one's wealth comes out of nowhere. He can wear silk and satin and have the right to talk to the streamer face to face. Isn't it because he was born into a good family and has a good ancestor? Raw blueberry juice. Is this the legendary difference in family status? To be honest, it's a little annoying. Tens of thousands of years ago, whose ancestors weren't monkeys climbing trees? A few hundred years ago, whose ancestors weren't farmers facing the yellow soil with their backs to the sky? If you have the ability to be proud of having a good ancestor here, why don't you work hard so that your descendants can boast about their ancestors? Su Huan City. Everyone understands this, but the ancients didn't listen to this. Otherwise, why would there be hierarchy? The audience in the streaming room discussed, and Jiang Pingji's face darkened. She asked, "Why should I be ridiculed?" Tang Yao's lips moved. Looking at Jiang Pingji's bright eyes, he momentarily forgot how to speak. When he realized what he had said, Jiang Pingji's face darkened. Tang Yao said, "How can the governor be so lowly? Look at the people under your rule. One is a sinner who has been branded, one is the son of a prostitute, one is a mixed blood, and the rest are uncivilized, courageous, and unwise boors. Since it's a great matter to help the world, why do you need to work with such lowly and immoral people? If this matter is spread, the scholars of the world will naturally be ashamed." Jiang Pingji snorted coldly after hearing that. Tang Yao felt a slight chill on his back. He subconsciously took a small step back. An indescribable chill spread from the soles of his feet to his brain. Jiang Pingji sneered. "Oh, but I don't think it's worth laughing at. On the contrary, it's you who said it that's hilarious." Tang Yao's face paled as if someone had nailed him to the spot. Master Yuanjing knew about Tang Yao's problem. He tried to correct it, but it was not very effective. This time, he had brought him here to broaden his horizons, so that he would not be a frog at the bottom of a well. Tang Yao's family background wasn't as high as Feng Jin's, but he wasn't weak either. He grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth, and the people around him instilled in him the idea that his family's bloodline was noble, and that the aristocratic families were born to be superior to the poor. He slowly accepted this kind of brainwashing, and he felt that people from poor families were insignificant and without virtue, and that he shouldn't associate with them. It was because of his admiration for Yuan Jing that he became a disciple of the Langyi Academy. This was the first time his outlook on life was impacted. Master Yuan Jing paid particular attention to education without discrimination. He always insisted on teaching students in accordance with their aptitude. Therefore, his students had different backgrounds. Tang Yao never interacted with students who weren't part of the landowning households. It seemed very rude, but this kind of behavior was normal among landowning households. Tang Yao was furious. He originally wanted to befriend Jiang Pingji, but he didn't expect her to hang out with people from all walks of life. It was fine that she didn't want to learn, and she slept with other women, but she had the bad habits of eating, drinking, and gambling. She behaved rudely, and she didn't have the slightest moral integrity that a landowning household should have. Jiang Pingji looked at Tang Yao coldly. The sinner you mentioned, his birth mother was killed by a domineering country gentleman. As a son, how can he be indifferent? When an ordinary man is angry, blood can be spilled. Is it wrong for Xiaoyu to stand up for his mother? Tang Yao was speechless. His birth mother was killed, and as a son he was indifferent. Wasn't that extremely unfilial? An unfilial person was an animal. As for the son of a prostitute? If it weren't for such an unfilial and unfaithful animal, would the women in the brothel still have feelings for him and get pregnant? The mistakes of parents don't implicate children. You said that Wen Zheng was a mixed blood, but in the end, wasn't it because the nobles of Dongqing were cowardly and incompetent, so their land was invaded by foreign clans, and their people were humiliated? If it was a humiliation, shouldn't those nobles, who held their positions without doing any work, commit suicide to apologize? Tang Zuda, I can still listen if you criticize them based on their talents. Using such an excuse to attack others is really the behavior of a despicable person. Tang Yao stood rooted to the ground after being scolded by Jiang Pingji. His ears were ringing. He wanted to refute, but the words were at the tip of his tongue, but he couldn't say them. Jiang Pingji continued, You said that the generals under me are all uncivilized, brave but not astute? That's a big mistake. If it weren't for them fighting in the north and south to quell the calamity of the Tsing-Yi army and the Red Lotus Group, Wanzhou today would just be purgatory on earth. Tang Zuda, have you ever seen the tragic sight of white bones exposed in the wild and no rooster crowing for 1,000 miles? I don't want to hit you, but with your body, I'm afraid you can't even withstand one of my fingers. In conclusion, Tang Yao, who was neither good at literature nor martial arts, had no right to criticize her little princesses. Jiang Pingji added one last stab. The old people often say, when you drink water, don't forget the person who dug the well. The grains you eat, the clothes you wear, every grain, every stitch and thread, what do you get from your own labor? These are all the hard work of ordinary people. From the beginning to the end, have you ever put in any effort? Have you ever shed a drop of sweat? In that case, are you considered an ungrateful person? After saying that, Jiang Pingji snorted coldly, turned around, and left, leaving Tang Yao rooted to the ground. Tang Yao followed Master Yuan Jing and left Langyi. As they hurried along, they traveled and studied. He, who lived in an ivory tower, finally saw the cruel scene outside the ivory tower. The wild wolves and fire dogs were so hungry that they were emaciated. In order to find food, they had no choice but to search for human bones on the ground to satisfy their hunger. The damaged white corpses were half covered and half exposed in the wilderness. In a trance, they seemed to be able to hear the mournful sobs of lonely souls. The refugees on the road had lost their humanity under the oppression of life. They could do all kinds of inhumane things. Such a miserable scene caused people to panic in their hearts. After entering the territory of Wanzhou, it turned out to be another paradise on earth. After asking carefully, Tang Yao discovered that the people had put those humble people on a pedestal. Some people even set up longevity tablets for them in their homes. Feng Jin, Wei Ci, Feng Zhen, and the others were all from gentry families. How could the others deserve it? That was why Tang Yao was so conflicted when he saw Jiang Pingji. What he saw and heard were in a fierce struggle with his own thoughts. The two sides were in a deadlock. Tang Yao suddenly had an impulse to try to find an answer from Jiang Pingji. Unsurprisingly, he was severely criticized by her. Tang Yao returned to the house in a daze. Master Yuanjing and Cheng Cheng were chatting and laughing. "Zuda, how is it?" Tang Yao pursed his lips and did not say a word. Although the master was always nagging, he was sure that the other party definitely knew what had happened. Master Yuanjing sighed and said, If there's anything you don't understand, just watch, listen, and think. Why bother to provoke her?" Chapter 880. Tang Yao still had no reaction. He looked at the dejected Lu Shi like a defeated rooster. He had lost all his vigor. Cheng Cheng's gaze shifted between the two of them, as if he was curious about what the teacher and student were up to. After a few breaths, Tang Yao said dejectedly, "I meant well." Although the boy's words were harsh, Tang Yao didn't mean any harm. Jiang Pingji had either been fighting or preparing for war all these years. She didn't attend gatherings between the gentry, so she didn't know what others thought of her. Tang Yao was different. He kept in close contact with the gentry, so he was well informed about all kinds of gossip. Lu Shi was the legitimate son of the Lu family in Hejin. No, the legitimate daughter. She had a rather noble background, but she didn't want to improve herself. She spent all her time with a group of lowly and immoral people. Tang Yao often heard people talking about her behind her back. Everyone said they were ashamed to be associated with her. Based on Tang Yao's worldview and standpoint, there was nothing wrong with those words. The noble families and the commoners were originally people of two different worlds. Yuanjing said, "That person's honey is my frost." Tang Yao said, "But..." His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but he swallowed the words that were hovering on the tip of his tongue. Tang Yao was confused. Had Lu Shi not discovered the crux of the problem? The crux. Why were there so few people seeking refuge with her? In terms of fame, fortune, birth, and prestige, her overall conditions weren't worse than others. Even though she was a woman, Dongqing wasn't Zhongzhao. She hadn't suffered too much from the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. Not to mention that she was the official governor of a province. She was in the limelight during the alliance meeting. With such good conditions, why were there so few gentry families willing to seek refuge with her? On the surface, it seemed that Lu Shi was in his prime. Seeking refuge with Lu Shi was more promising than seeking refuge with her. In fact, there was another, deeper reason hidden within. How many of the people around Jiang Pingji were from proper aristocratic families? The civil officials were divided equally. Feng Jin, Wei Ci, and Feng Zhen were from gentry families. But other than Feng Jin, the other two's families had fallen. As for the generals, the situation was even worse. Except for Lu Yue, who was somewhat promising, the others were all wiped out. Therefore, in terms of power structure, 80% of Wanzhou was made up of people from poor backgrounds. In the eyes of those proud and arrogant landowning households, this was just a group that couldn't be shown in public. Those aristocratic families who valued bloodlines and insisted on family status were not even willing to share the same room with people of humble origins. To put it bluntly, they would feel disgusted even if they breathed the same air, not to mention working under a lord and being suppressed by someone of humble origins. How could they tolerate this? This was absolutely intolerable. Not every landowning household was as noble as the Feng family and had a clear understanding of themselves and the general trend of the world. This was also the reason why the Feng clan had been able to survive for 1,000 years. In contrast, the other aristocratic families had been beaten to death on the beach one after another. Tang Yao said that Su Ku was a sinner who had been branded, Qiguan Rang was the son of a prostitute, and Yang Si was a mixed-blood bastard. This just happened to reflect the position of power in Wanzhou in the eyes of the aristocrats. A lowly birth was an original sin. How could a lowly and immoral person be associated with them? As for those reckless martial artists who lacked literary virtue and could not be educated, they were even more despised. Dongqing had always valued literature and restrained martial arts. Coupled with their poor birth, the group of martial artists in Wanzhou was naturally looked down upon and despised. Of course, there was no lack of clear-headed and noble people among the aristocrats, but they were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Tang Yao was scolded by Jiang Pingji, and he felt very wronged. In his opinion, he was persuading her out of goodwill to get closer to the aristocrats and not to lower her status by mingling with a group of humble people. Master Yuanjing sighed. Tang Yao was a very filial and good student who respected his teachers, but he also had the bad habits of the aristocrats. As a smart person, how could he not see through Jiang Pingji's plan? To him, whether it was the aristocrats or the poor, those who were useful were people, and those who were useless were just trash. In times of prosperity, the aristocrats could cover the sky with one hand. In times of chaos, etiquette collapsed. Whoever had the bigger fist was the boss. Who cared if you were an aristocrat or a poor family? Seeing that Tang Yao's head was still hanging, Yuanjing said, "Lanting is a smart person. How could she not know her own situation?" Tang Yao was even more confused when he said that. If Jiang Pingji was really clear about her situation, she should have made better use of her advantages and contacted the aristocrats. But now, the aristocrats had developed a prejudice against her, and none of them were willing to join her. Master Yuanjing said, "Zuda, you don't have to worry too much. The situation will improve in, at most, 5 years." It was not completely chaotic yet, and the aristocrats were still immersed in the dream of controlling everything. When the north borderline was destroyed, "You don't care about me now, and you won't be able to reach me in the future." Cheng Cheng heard that and glanced at Master Yuanjing from the corner of his eyes. Cheng Cheng and Jiang Pingji were like teachers and friends. He vaguely knew about the latter's plan. He did not expect the teacher in Langia County to be able to see through everything so keenly. Master Yuanjing said to Tang Yao, "Zuda, come here and help me organize." Instead of letting the student go out and offend people, it was better to keep him by his side and help him compile the teaching materials to avoid getting into trouble. Putting aside Tang Yao's other qualities, at least his talent was worthy of recognition. Little did he know that Master Yuanjing's decision allowed Tang Yao to avoid a fatal crisis. Tang Yao and Jiang Pingji's conversation did not go unnoticed. The content of the conversation spread out and soon reached the ears of a few people involved. Su Ke's expression was cold. Qiguan Rang sneered when he heard that. Yang Si snorted and went straight to the door. As mentioned earlier, Yang Si's teacher was Master Yuanjing. If one were to get to the bottom of it, he and Tang Yao could be considered brothers of the same master. In his early years, Master Yuanjing traveled abroad to train himself and pick up good seedlings from his family. Yang Si, who was still a baby, was abandoned by his mother behind the door of a cheap hostel near the brothel. The place was remote and cold. When he was about to cry his last breath, Master Yuanjing happened to be practicing his sword in the backyard of the hostel. He heard the noise and picked up the baby. Master Yuanjing knew the child's background, so he did not deliberately look for the child's mother. Instead, he found a farmer nearby to raise the child. Otherwise, with Yang Si's status, how could he learn to read and write? Yang Si did not come to beat him up, and he did not introduce himself as soon as they met. Instead, he called himself Master Yuanjing's student. Tang Yao did not know his background, so he was foolishly tricked by Yang Si to learn from each other. After a round of competition, Tang Yao lost more than he won. "May I know where you are from, senior?" Tang Yao asked in hindsight. His attitude was sincere and humble. Yang Si smiled insincerely and said, "I'm from Dingjun in Shenzhou." Tang Yao's heart skipped a beat when he heard the address. He had a vague bad feeling. As expected, Yang Si stood up and flicked his sleeves. He looked humble, but he was actually mocking the other party. "He's just the son of a prostitute. He's just a lowly and immoral person. How is he qualified to be called by you?" You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.